I turned the key slow, the way Dad said you do when a lock has a memory. That night, it remembered my wife's perfume and the banker's cologne. In the kitchen where we'd eaten dinner for 27 years, I found 2 washed coffee cups, a bank envelope hidden in the cookbook, and my forged signature on papers mortgaging the land my father left me. Georgia wasn't just having an affair, she was stealing 3 generations of my family's legacy. And I would fight back with paper, with truth, by making the whole town witness what they had done. Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. Chapter 1. I turned the key slow, the way Dad said you do when a lock has a memory. That night, it remembered my wife's perfume and the banker's cologne. The brass key had worn smooth from 30 years of my thumb finding the same groove, but tonight something felt different. Wrong. The kitchen door opened to silence thick as molasses, and that smell hit me like a slap. Not just Georgia's white shoulders perfume, which had been our Sunday scent since '73. No, underneath it hung something else. Something that didn't belong in my house. Men's cologne. Expensive. The kind they sell at department stores in the city, not at Dawson's Pharmacy on Main Street. I set my work boots on the mat, careful not to track mud across Georgia's clean floor. The kitchen looked normal enough, dishes drying in the rack, tomorrow's coffee already measured in the percolator, her grocery list held to the refrigerator with the magnet shaped like a barn we'd bought at the state fair. But there, next to the sugar bowl, sat 2 coffee cups. Not one. Georgia and I had been married 27 years. She drank her coffee from the blue mug with the chip on the handle. I drank mine from the green one that said, "World's Okayest Farmer," a Father's Day gift from back when we thought we'd have kids to give such things. That second cup in the dish rack wasn't green or blue. It was one of the good china cups we kept for company. I walked through the house like I was doing inventory at the feed store. Everything in its place, but wrong somehow. An ashtray on the porch table neither of us smoked, hadn't since I quit in '82. In the trash bin by the barn, the metal container half buried under old grain sacks, 3 cigarette butts, Marlboro Reds. The filters still white, barely smoked, like someone lit them just to have something to do with their hands. And there, tucked between Georgia's recipes for 7-layer salad and beef stroganoff, a bank envelope, Plains County Bank and Trust. The green logo stared at me like an accusation. I knew that logo better than I knew my own face in the mirror, knew it from 20 years of loan applications, refinancing paperwork, and harvest loans. The bank owned more of my farm than I did, truth be told. All except for one piece. The last acre. That's what Dad had called it. Though it was actually 4 3/4 acres of the best soil in the county. Never flooded, not even in '85 when the creek jumped its banks and drowned half the valley. The corn grew taller there. The wheat fuller. Dad used to say that soil was good as bread. You could almost eat it raw and gain weight. Keep the acre whole, he'd told me the day before the cancer took him. His hand had been paper thin by then, but his grip still had farmer's strength when he grabbed my wrist. Whatever else you lose, Calvin, you keep that acre whole. The deed to the last acre sat in the metal box under Dad's ledger, separate from all the other papers. It was the only piece of the farm that was mine clear and free, no banknote attached. Georgia knew this. Hell, everyone in Plains County knew this. The last acre was Miller land, had been since my grandfather broke sod in 1921. I opened the refrigerator, needing something normal to look at. Everything lined up neat as soldiers' milk, eggs, leftovers in Tupperware labeled with masking tape. Georgia ran a tight ship, always had. But there in the door next to my Budweiser sat a bottle of wine, good wine with a cork and everything. We didn't drink wine. We were beer and whiskey people, occasional brandy at Christmas. The living room told more of the story. The cushions on the couch pressed down in the middle, both sides like 2 people had been sitting close. Very close. The AM radio on the side table was tuned to some FM station playing jazz. We listened to the farm report and country music, nothing else. Who the hell listened to jazz in Plains County? I climbed the stairs, each step creaking its familiar song. Our bedroom door stood open. The bed was made with military corners, same as always, but Georgia's pillow had been fluffed and placed just so, like she was trying to erase something. Her perfume hung heavier here, and underneath it, that cologne again. I recognized it now, the same smell that followed Ezra Taylor around the bank, trailing him like a shadow of success. Ezra Taylor, loan officer at Plains County Bank and Trust for the last 5 years. 43 years old, smooth talker, hands that had never held anything heavier than a fountain pen. He'd come from a bank in Lincoln, they said, brought in to modernize our little branch. Started wearing those suits that cost more than most folks' monthly mortgage payment. Started talking about agricultural portfolios and risk assessment matrices, like farming was something you could solve with a calculator. He'd been friendly enough when we refinanced last year after the drought, real friendly. Shook my hand with both of his like a politician, asked about Georgia, said what a lovely woman she was, how lucky I was. I'd thought nothing of it then. Just banker talk, the grease that made the money machine run smooth. Now I thought about last week's church social. Georgia, in her new dress. When had she bought that? Said it was on sale at Peterson's, but it looked like something from the city. The way Ezra had appeared at our table with 2 cups of punch, one for him, one for Georgia. The way she'd laughed at his joke about interest rates, throwing her head back like it was the funniest thing she'd heard all year. Book club ran late, she'd been saying more often. Tuesday nights, sometimes Thursdays too, started 3 months ago. Reading romance novels with the church ladies, she said. But when I'd run into Gladys Hoffman at the hardware store and mentioned how much Georgia was enjoying their book club, Gladys had looked at me like I'd grown a second head. What book club, Calvin? I'd covered, said I must have misunderstood, but the seed was planted. Back in the kitchen, I pulled out Dad's ledger from the drawer where I kept it wrapped in oilcloth. Every harvest, every sale, every loan payment for 40 years was recorded in his careful script, and then in mine. Numbers don't lie. People do, but numbers tell the truth if you know how to read them. I flipped to this year's entries. Everything balanced, every penny accounted for. But there, paper-clipped to last month's page, was a photocopy I didn't recognize. Amended security agreement, it said at the top. Legal language dense as winter wheat, but I could read enough to understand what it was saying. It was adding collateral to our operating loan, adding the last acre. My signature was at the bottom, except it wasn't. I knew my own hand like I knew the sound of my truck's engine. This signature started from the left, looping back. I'm right-handed. I start my signature from the right, always have. The C in Calvin was too round, the M in Miller too sharp. Someone had practiced, gotten close, but not close enough. I set down the paper like it might burn me. In the margin, in pencil so light I almost missed it, someone had written, E, this handles the acre. The handwriting was George's. She abbreviated names in her grocery lists the same way. C, get milk, meant Calvin, get milk. E, this handles the acre, meant. My wedding ring caught the kitchen light as I reached for the phone, then stopped. Who would I call? The sheriff? And say what my wife might be forging my signature with her boyfriend who happens to control my loans? No. This required planning, strategy. Dad always said the difference between a good farmer and a dead farmer was knowing when to plant and when to wait. Right now, I needed to wait. Watch. Gather my crop of evidence like I was bringing in wheat before a storm. I walked back to the kitchen door, turned that brass key in the lock again. Slow. Deliberate. It clicked home with a sound like a promise. Tomorrow, Georgia would come home from wherever she really went on Tuesday nights. She'd kiss my cheek, ask about my day, heat up the casserole she'd left in the refrigerator. We'd eat dinner and talk about the weather, the price of corn, who was sick at church. Normal married people talk. But tonight, I'd learned something. The lock remembered what it had witnessed my wife's perfume mixed with banker's cologne, secrets seeping into the wood grain like oil. And if a lock could remember, so could I. I picked up my wedding ring from where I'd set it on the counter while washing up for dinner. 27 years I'd worn it, only taking it off for the dirty work that might damage it. The gold had worn thin on the bottom from decades of gripping tools and steering wheels. I held it up to the light, looking through the circle like it was a window to somewhere else. Then I set it down on the kitchen table, right on the burn mark I'd accidentally made with a soldering iron back in '79, trying to fix the toaster. The ring spun once, twice, then went still, pointing like a compass needle toward the bank envelope tucked between George's recipes. In the morning, I'd start keeping my own records. Not in Dad's ledger, that was for farm business. This would need a new notebook, something small I could carry in my shirt pocket. Every date, every absence, every lie would get its own line. Facts only. No feelings, no speculation. Just the truth, written down plain. Because if they wanted the last acre, they'd have to do more than forge my signature. They'd have to go through me. And I might be 53 years old with bad knees and hands that ached when rain was coming, but I'd learned a thing or two in Vietnam about fighting wars where the enemy looked like a friend. This would be a different kind of war. No rifles, no grenades, just paper and signatures and the law that governed both, but war all the same. I picked up the brass key one more time, feeling its weight, its worn edges. Tomorrow I'd make a copy at Henderson's Hardware. Keep one in the truck, one in the barn, one in places Georgia didn't know about. Because if that lock remembered what happened tonight, I wanted to make sure I could always get back in to find what else it might remember tomorrow. The AM radio in the corner crackled to life with the late-night farm report. Corn futures down, wheat holding steady, rain expected by Thursday, normal things, true things, things you could count on. But underneath the reporter's steady voice, I heard something else. The whisper of paper against paper, the scratch of a pen trying to copy another man's name, the sound of my life being stolen one forged letter at a time. I turned off the radio and headed upstairs. Georgia would be home soon, full of stories about book club, about what Dorothy Henderson said about the new preacher, about how tired she was from all that reading. And I'd listen. I'd nod. I'd play the fool she apparently thought I was, but I'd also remember. Every word, every gesture, every lie. Because the lock wasn't the only thing in this house with a memory. The rooster crowed at 5:47, same as every morning for the last 3 years since I bought him from Ed Thornton's farm. You could set your watch by that bird. Georgia used to joke that he was more reliable than the atomic clock they talked about on the radio. Georgia wasn't joking about anything this morning. She stood at the stove, her back straight as a fence post, flipping eggs with the precise motion of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. Her hair was already pinned up, every strand in place despite the humidity that had rolled in overnight. "Morning," I said, same as always. "Coffee's ready," she replied, not turning around. "Eggs'll be done in 2 minutes." I poured my coffee into the green mug, leaving the china cup she'd washed and put back in the cabinet. The coffee tasted normal, strong, bitter, with that edge of metal from our well water. Georgia had made it the way she always did, 2 scoops for the pot plus 1 for the road, as her mother used to say. We ate in the familiar silence of a long marriage, forks scraping ceramic, the kitchen clock ticking above the refrigerator. But the silence felt different now, like the air before a thunderstorm when the pressure drops and your ears pop. "Going to town today," I said, mopping up egg yolk with wheat toast. "Need to settle up at the feed store." "Bank's open till 5, Georgia said. "Might as well stop there, too. That quarterly payment's coming due." She said it casual, like she was reminding me to pick up milk. But I caught the way her fingers tightened on her coffee cup, knuckles going white for just a second. "Might do that," I said. After breakfast, I headed out to handle the morning chores. The cattle were waiting by the fence, breath steaming in the cool morning air. 43 head of Angus, good stock, worth decent money if beef prices held. They crowded against the gate as I forked hay from the truck bed, their bodies warm and solid, real in a way that nothing inside the house felt anymore. Cooper Davis was already at the grain elevator when I pulled up, his truck hood open, him bent over the engine like a surgeon. Cooper had been my best friend since high school, could fix anything with an engine and most things without one. "Morning, Cal," he said without looking up. "This damn fuel pump's giving me fits. Need a hand?" "Nah, just need to sweet-talk it a little." He straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better decades. "You look like hell." "Thanks. You always know just what to say." Cooper studied me with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. Everything all right at home? I wanted to tell him. Wanted to spill it all right there in the morning sun, let someone else carry half the weight. But I just shrugged. Quarterly payments coming up. You know how it is. Yeah, I know. He didn't look convinced, but Cooper wasn't one to push. You heading to the bank? Among other places. Well, tell that new loan officer to go easy on us poor farmers. He said it with a grin, but there was an edge to it. Cooper didn't like Ezra Taylor any more than he liked the new computerized cash register at the feed store. Will do. Plains County Bank and Trust sat on Main Street between the barber shop and the insurance office, its green awning faded from years of sun. The building had been there since 1902, survived the Depression, 2 world wars, and more bad harvests than anyone could count. It was solid, permanent, part of the landscape like the water tower and the grain elevator. But inside, things had changed. Ezra Taylor had brought in new furniture, replaced the old oak desks with something modern and sleek. A computer sat on every desk now, screens glowing green with numbers that decided people's fates. "Calvin!" Ezra's voice boomed across the lobby. He strode over, hand extended, that cologne preceding him like a herald. "Good to see you. How's that winter wheat looking?" "It's April, Ezra. Winter wheat's been in the ground since October." He laughed like I'd made a joke. Of course, of course. Still learning the rhythms out here. City boy, you know?" He clapped me on the shoulder, left his hand there a beat too long. "Come on back to my office. We can go over those quarterlies." I followed him through the maze of new desks to his corner office. Through the glass walls, I could see the whole bank, everyone visible to everyone else. Modern management theory, Ezra had explained once. Transparency and accountability. "Actually," I said, settling into the chair across from his desk, "I wanted to talk about restructuring options." His eyebrows went up. "Oh? I wasn't aware you were having difficulties." "Not difficulties, just thinking ahead. Drought last year set us back some, and with corn prices where they are." Of course, of course. He pulled out a folder, had it been sitting there waiting, and spread some papers across the desk. "We have several options for established customers like yourself. Portfolio consolidation, extended terms, adjusted rates based on collateral." That last word hung in the air like smoke. "What kind of collateral adjustments?" "Well," he leaned back, fingers steepled, "the bank's been conducting new assessments of agricultural assets. Land values have changed considerably. Some parcels are worth more than others now. That northwest section of yours, for instance, the last acre. Is that what you call it? Charming. Yes, that parcel has excellent soil ratings. Never floods, I understand. My father always said it was the best land in the county. Your father was a smart man." Ezra shuffled through the papers. "With that as primary collateral, we could offer very favorable terms. Bring your wife along next time, and we'll go through everything together." There it was, the hook with Georgia's name on it. "Georgia doesn't usually handle the farm business," I said. "Oh, but she should be involved. Modern farming is a partnership, Calvin. Besides," he smiled, teeth white as fresh paint, bank policy for restructuring. Both spouses need to sign off on any homestead exemptions. I nodded slow, like I was thinking it over. "I'll bring it up with her." "Wonderful. How is Georgia, by the way? I haven't seen her since." He paused, and I swear he almost slipped. "Since church last Sunday." "She's fine. Busy with her book club." "Ah, yes, the book club." Something flickered in his eyes. "Thursday nights, isn't it?" "Tuesdays," I corrected, watching him close. "Right. Tuesdays, of course." I stood up to leave, then turned back like I'd just remembered something. "Hey, you know anything about that new assessment company? Moore and Thomas? Thought I saw their truck out by my place last week." Ezra's smile tightened just a fraction. "They do contract work for several banks in the area. Very thorough. I'm sure they are." I left the bank and drove straight to the county courthouse. The clerk's office was in the basement, fluorescent lights humming over rows of metal filing cabinets that held the paper bones of the county every deed, lien, birth, death, and marriage for the last 100 years. Daisy Wilson had been county clerk for 30 years, knew where every skeleton was buried, and had probably filed the paperwork for it. Calvin Miller, she said, looking up over her reading glasses. Haven't seen you since you filed that hay contract last fall. Hey, Daisy. Need to understand something about paperwork. My specialty. Pull up a chair. I sat in the wooden chair that had probably been there since Daisy started. How do lions get recorded? Amendments to loans, that sort of thing? She gave me a long look. Something I should know about? Just trying to understand the process, for future reference. Daisy pulled out a binder thick as a phone book. Every document that affects real property has to be recorded here. Bank files it, I stamp it with date and time, assign it a book and page number, then it becomes public record. What about the signatures? Has to be notarized. I check the notary stamp, make sure it's current, matches our registry. She flipped to a page of official seals. See? Every notary in the county has their seal on file here. The stamp, the signature, the commission number. If something doesn't match, I flag it. And if someone wanted to check if something had been filed? Public record. Anyone can look. She studied me over her glasses. Calvin, is there something specific you're looking for? I pulled out the photocopy of the amended security agreement I'd found in Georgia's recipes. This look familiar? Daisy examined it, running her finger along the lines of text. This is a security amendment adding collateral to an existing loan. She looked at the bottom. But this hasn't been filed yet. There's no recording stamp, no book and page number. So it doesn't exist officially. Not until it's filed here, but Calvin. She hesitated, then pointed to the notary seal. This seal looks off. Off how? The font's wrong. And the embossing, see how it's too shallow? Real notary seals bite deep into the paper. This looks like someone pressed it with something else, maybe traced it. My stomach went cold. You're sure? I've been looking at notary seals for 30 years. This isn't right. Whose signature is this supposed to be? I pointed to my name at the bottom. Daisy looked at me for a long moment. That's not your signature. No, I said. It's not. She handed the paper back to me, her face serious. Calvin, if someone's forging documents related to your property, you need to file a notice of disputed instrument. That puts a red flag on anything trying to be filed about your land. How do I do that? She was already pulling out forms. We do it right now. We spent the next hour filling out paperwork, Daisy explaining each step. By the time we were done, any attempt to file anything about my property would trigger an alert. It wasn't much, but it was something. Calvin, Daisy said as I was leaving, be careful. When money and land get mixed up with personal matters, things can get ugly fast. What makes you think this is personal? She gave me a look that said I wasn't fooling anyone. I've been in this basement for 30 years. I see everything that goes on in this county eventually. Everything. You understand? I nodded. Daisy knew. Maybe not the details, but she knew enough. It was past noon when I got home. Georgia's car was in the driveway, and I could smell bread baking from the porch. She made bread every Wednesday, had since we were first married. The familiar smell should have been comforting, but now it felt like part of the lie keeping up appearances while she helped steal what my father had left me. I found her in the kitchen, hands covered in flour, kneading another batch of dough. She didn't look up when I came in. Bank go okay? She asked. Fine. Ezra says hi. Her hands paused for just a second, then continued their rhythm. That's nice. Says we should come in together next time. Go over restructuring options. I don't know anything about farm finances. That's what I told him. But he says it's bank policy. Both spouses need to be there. She turned to face me then, flour dusting her cheek like war paint. When? I didn't set anything up. Wanted to talk to you first. Well? She turned back to her dough. I suppose we should do what the bank wants. Can't afford to make them unhappy. No, I agreed. We can't afford that. That evening, we ate dinner in front of the TV watching the news from Omaha. A savings and loan in Texas had failed. Another farm foreclosure auction in Kansas. The usual catalog of disasters that made our problem seem smaller. Georgia cleared the dishes while I pretended to read the newspaper. At 6:47, the phone rang. Georgia answered it in the kitchen, her voice too low for me to hear the words. But I heard the tone soft, careful, intimate in a way she hadn't been with me in months. "Church committee," she said when she came back. "Meeting tomorrow night about the spring bazaar." "Not book club?" "No, that's Tuesday." "Right, Tuesday." She went upstairs to take a bath, and I walked out to the porch. The sun was setting over the last acre, painting the soil red as blood. Somewhere out there, survey stakes might already be in the ground, marking off what they planned to take. I pulled out the small notebook I'd bought at the drugstore and wrote, "Wednesday, April 20th. Bank meeting with ET 10, 3011, 15. Suggests restructuring with last acre as collateral, wants G present for signatures. Phone call 6:47 p.m. G claimed church committee Thursday meeting claimed spring bazaar. Facts only. No speculation, just the truth, written down plain." The answering machine in the hallway clicked on while I was writing. I hadn't heard it ring. The tape rolled, and a man's voice, faint under the static, said, "Tomorrow night, then. I'll bring the folder. You bring your signature." The machine clicked off. The message light blinked red in the darkening hallway. I stood up and walked inside, rewound the tape, played it again. Then again. The voice was muffled, careful, but something about the cadence, the way he said signature, with that slight emphasis on the first syllable. I'd heard Ezra Taylor say that word the same way just this morning. I wrote it down in my notebook. Facts only. But facts were adding up to something that was going to tear this house apart board by board, nail by nail. Georgia's footsteps moved across the bedroom floor above me, getting ready for bed, getting ready to lie next to me and pretend everything was normal. And I'd lie there too, pretending to sleep while the lock on the door remembered what it had seen and the answering machine held proof of what was coming. Tomorrow was Thursday, not book club night, but Georgia would leave after dinner anyway, and this time I'd know exactly where she was going. The message light blinked in the darkness like a heartbeat, like a warning, like a promise of what was to come. Rain hammered the kitchen window Thursday morning, turning the world gray as old dishwater. The forecast had been wrong again, said the storm wouldn't hit until evening, but weather doesn't read forecasts, and neither do lies. They come when they come. Georgia left for town just after breakfast, mentioning something about groceries and the pharmacy. She wore lipstick, which she never did for errands. I watched her car disappear into the rain and then spread everything across the kitchen table. Dad's ledger, our bank statements going back 2 years, the farm's operating loan documents, and that forged amendment I'd found in her recipes. You learn to read documents when you farm. Not just the words, but the patterns, the way numbers flow from one season to the next, like water finding its level. Our operating loan had started at $47,000 in 1986. Normal enough for a farm our size. Each year we'd pay it down with harvest money, then draw against it for spring planting, a cycle as old as farming itself. But something changed last September. A new fee here, an adjustment there. The balance had crept up to $63,000 without any major purchases to explain it. Service charges that didn't match previous years. Assessment fees that appeared and disappeared like prairie dogs. I pulled out my calculator, the old Texas Instruments I'd used since the 70s. Numbers don't lie, but they can be made to dance if you know the steps. And someone had been choreographing a complex routine with our money. Then I found it. Tucked inside a church bulletin from 3 weeks ago, Palm Sunday, of all things was another photocopy. This one was clearer than the first, maybe a second or third generation copy. Amended security agreement, across the top in that official font banks use to make everything seem carved in stone. The amendment was dated March 15th, just last month. It listed our existing collateral equipment, cattle, grain on hand, and then added a new section. Additional security interest, parcel 47B, commonly known as NW quarter section, comprising 4.75 acres, free and clear of prior encumbrance. The last acre. They'd used the legal description, but I knew what parcel 47B was. My signature sat at the bottom, and this time it was better. Someone had been practicing. The C in Calvin started from the right place. The M in Miller had the correct slant. But the pressure was wrong. I signed my name with the same heavy hand I use for everything else. Farming doesn't teach you to be gentle. This signature was careful, tentative, like someone trying not to make a mistake. The notary seal was clearer on this copy, too. Chloe Hernandez, commission 4471, expires December 31st, 1989. Chloe ran the insurance office next to the bank, did notary work on the side. I'd used her plenty of times. But the seal on this document, Daisy was right. It was too shallow, and looking closer, the font was from an older seal. Chloe had gotten new seals made just last year when she renewed her commission. I knew because she'd complained about the cost when I was getting hay contracts notarized. In the margin of the amendment, in pencil so light I had to hold it under the kitchen light to read it, was George's note. E. This handles the acre. I stared at those 5 words until they burned into my brain. My wife, plotting with another man to steal what my father had protected through the Depression, the war, the farm crisis of the early 80s, when everyone else was losing land left and right. The rain picked up, drumming on the roof like impatient fingers. I checked the answering machine. The tape from last night was gone, replaced with a fresh one. Georgia was covering tracks, but she didn't know I'd already copied it using Cooper's old tape deck he kept for recording engine sounds when he was diagnosing problems. I gathered up all the papers except the amendment and locked them in Dad's filing cabinet in the basement. The amendment I kept with me. Evidence this clear doesn't come along often, and I wasn't letting it out of my sight. The phone rang. I let the machine get it. Cal, it's Cooper. That fuel pump finally gave up the ghost. I'm stuck at Henderson's Hardware if you can give me a ride. Also, we should talk. I drove into town through the rain, the amendment in a plastic bag on the seat beside me. Cooper was waiting under the hardware store's awning, hands in his pockets, looking like a man with something on his mind. Thanks for coming, he said, climbing in. Truck's deader than a doornail. Where to? Actually, can we just drive for a bit? Maybe out past the cemetery? That was code. The cemetery road was quiet, isolated. When Cooper and I needed to talk about serious things, his divorce, my dad's cancer, the time his son got arrested, we drove the cemetery road. Spill it, I said once we were out of town. Cooper was quiet for a moment, watching the rain streak across the windshield. I was at the Fairview Motel last night. My cousin Darlene works the night desk. I was dropping off a part for her car. The Fairview was 10 miles out on Highway 75, the kind of place that asked no questions and cleaned the rooms maybe twice a week. And I saw George's car. That burgundy Cutlass is hard to miss. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, but I kept my voice steady. You sure? Cal, I've known that car for 15 years. It was parked around back by the dumpsters like someone didn't want it seen from the road. He paused. Ezra Taylor's car was 3 spaces down. There it was, confirmation from someone besides me. It felt like relief and rage all mixed together. How long have you known? I asked. Suspected for a few weeks. Town's not that big, Cal. People notice things. But last night was the first time I saw them both there. What room? Didn't check. Figured that was your business if you wanted to know. I pulled the amendment out of the plastic bag and handed it to Cooper. My business is getting complicated. He read it, his face going dark. This your signature? What do you think? I think someone's about to have a real bad time. Cooper had served 2 tours in Korea, came back quieter but harder, like steel that's been forged. What's the play? No violence, no confrontation, just paper and facts. That's not much of a weapon. It's enough if you know how to use it. We drove back to town, and I dropped Cooper at his garage. I might need you to witness some things in the coming days, I said. Whatever you need. Your dad helped my family when nobody else would. This is me returning the favor. This could get messy. The bank holds paper on half the businesses in town. Cooper shrugged. My shop's paid off. Let them try. I drove to the courthouse next. Daisy was at her desk, eating a sandwich and reading a romance novel. Didn't expect to see you again so soon, she said. Need to check something. I showed her the amendment. Can you run the document number, see if it's been filed? She typed into her computer, the green screen reflecting off her glasses. Nothing. No filing with that document number. It doesn't exist in our system. So if someone was waiting to file it, they'd wait until you missed a payment, then file it quick. Once it's in the system with that forged signature, you'd have to prove it's fake, and that takes time. Meanwhile, they could move forward with foreclosure proceedings on the last acre. Can you make a certified copy of your search showing nothing's been filed? Already printing it. The dot matrix printer chattered to life. Calvin, you need to get ahead of this. File a preemptive notice. Already did that yesterday. No, something stronger. File an affidavit of fraud. Put them on notice that you know about the forged document. Not yet. I need more evidence first. Daisy gave me a long look. Don't wait too long. Paper moves fast when money's involved. I drove home through the rain, thinking about timing. Everything in farming is timing: when to plant, when to harvest, when to hold your grain, and when to sell. This was no different. Move too soon and they'd deny everything, maybe destroy evidence. Wait too long and the trap would snap shut. Georgia's car was in the driveway when I got home. She was in the kitchen, starting dinner. Pot roast, from the smell of it. My favorite. The kind of meal you make when you're feeling guilty or trying to soften someone up for bad news. "Cooper called," she said without turning around. "Said thanks for the ride." His truck broke down. Seems like everything's breaking down lately. Was there an edge to her voice, or was I imagining it? I went upstairs to change out of my wet clothes. Our bedroom felt different now, like a crime scene. Everything exactly where it should be, but somehow wrong. George's jewelry box on the dresser, her reading glasses on the nightstand, the wedding photo on the wall, all props in a play I hadn't known I was part of. The bottom drawer of George's dresser was slightly open. She was meticulous about closed drawers, said it was how she was raised. I pulled it open further. Under her winter sweaters was a manila folder I'd never seen before. Inside were bank documents, not our regular statements, but internal memos on Plains County Bank letterhead. Appraisal request Miller property, parcel 47B. Risk assessment agricultural portfolio. Collateral valuation adjustment proposal. Each document had Ezra Taylor's signature at the bottom, but more interesting were the handwritten notes in the margins. Georgia's writing, but also someone else's. A man's hand, sharp and angular. Primary asset unencumbered optimal for portfolio balance. Spousal consent achievable through standard documentation. Timeline. File upon default or voluntary restructure, whichever comes first. The last page made my blood run cold. It was a draft letter to Anderson Ag Servicing, a farm management company known for buying distressed agricultural properties. The letter outlined the potential availability of parcel 47B, pending resolution of current encumbrance. They weren't just planning to steal the last acre. They already had a buyer lined up. I heard Georgia's footsteps on the stairs and quickly closed the drawer, leaving it slightly open just as I'd found it. She appeared in the doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Dinner's ready." We ate in near silence, just the sound of silverware on plates and rain on the windows. Georgia kept glancing at me, then away like she was measuring something. "Church committee meeting tonight," she said finally. "In this rain? It's important. Spring bazaar planning." "Thought that was last night." She paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "That was finance committee. Tonight's planning committee." Busy woman. "Someone has to do it." She left at 7, taking an umbrella but forgetting her reading glasses. I watched from the window as her taillights disappeared into the rain, then counted to 100. She wasn't coming back for anything forgotten. I called the church. Mrs. Patterson answered on the third ring. "Methodist Church, how can I help you?" "Mrs. Patterson, it's Calvin Miller. Is the planning committee meeting tonight?" "Planning committee? No, dear. That's next Tuesday. Why?" "Must have gotten my dates mixed up. Georgia mentioned something about it, but I probably misheard." "Oh, Georgia's not on the planning committee anyway. She's on finance, but they met last month." I thanked her and hung up. Then I did something I'd never done in 27 years of marriage. I drove to the Fairview Motel. The rain had led up to a drizzle. The motel squatted beside the highway like a wounded animal, its neon sign flickering between vacancy and darkness. I parked across the road at the abandoned Sinclair station where I could see the parking lot. Georgia's burgundy Cutlass was there, parked in the back just like Cooper had said. 3 spaces down, Ezra Taylor's brown Lincoln, still wearing dealer plates even though he'd bought it 6 months ago. Room 12. The light was on behind the curtains. I didn't need to see more. Didn't need to kick in the door or confront them. That would be satisfying for about 30 seconds. Then, I'd lose any legal ground I had. Instead, I drove to the courthouse where I knew Daisy sometimes worked late on Thursdays. She was there, her office light the only one on in the building. "Calvin, what are you doing out in this weather?" "I need to file that affidavit of fraud. Tonight." She looked at my face and didn't ask questions. We spent the next hour documenting everything: the forged signature, the fraudulent notary seal, the attempt to add the last acre as collateral without my knowledge or consent. Daisy typed it all up on official forms, had me sign in triplicate, then stamped each copy with the official seal of Plains County. "This gets filed first thing tomorrow morning," she said. "Anyone tries to file anything about your property after that, they're looking at criminal charges for filing fraudulent documents." I drove home through empty streets, the town shut down against the rain. Georgia's car wasn't back yet. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with Dad's ledger, looking at 40 years of careful records. Every crop, every sale, every good year and bad one, written in his precise hand and then mine. At the bottom of tonight's page, I wrote, April 21st, 1988. Confirmed G at Fairview Motel with ET forged amendment document in hand, attempting to steal last acre affidavit of fraud filed with county clerk. The paper lied, but the truth is on record now. The front door opened at 10:47. Georgia's footsteps, careful on the stairs. The bathroom door closing, water running. The familiar sounds of a marriage going through its motions while the foundation rotted underneath. I picked up the tape recorder I'd bought that afternoon at Radio Shack. Fresh batteries, fresh tape. I clicked it on and spoke clear and steady. "This is Calvin Miller. It's 11:15 p.m. on April 21st, 1988. I'm about to tell you what happened to the last acre and who tried to steal it." The tape rolled, recording silence and rain and the sound of a man preparing for war. Chapter 2. Dawn came pale and washed out, like the rain had leached all the color from the world. I'd been up since 3:30, couldn't sleep for thinking about what needed doing. By the time Georgia stirred at 6, I had my plan laid out neat as fence posts. No fists, no whispers, paper only. I said it out loud to the bathroom mirror while I shaved, watching my reflection like it was someone else. The man looking back had his father's eyes, that same steady gaze that could wait out a storm or a bad harvest or a banker trying to steal what wasn't his. Georgia was already in the kitchen when I came down, measuring coffee grounds with the same precise motion she'd used for 27 years. She didn't look like a woman who'd spent last night in a motel room with another man. She looked like what she'd always looked like, a farmer's wife starting another day. "You were up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep. Rain kept me awake. It stopped now." "Yeah, it stopped." We stood there in the kitchen, 2 people who'd shared a bed for decades, now strangers circling each other like wary dogs. She knew something had shifted. I could see it in the way she held herself, careful and contained. "I need to run into town this morning," I said, "meeting with Cooper about his truck." On Sunday? Today was Friday. She'd lost track of the days. Interesting. "It's Friday, Georgia." Something flickered across her face. "Of course. I don't know where my head is." I knew exactly where her head was, but I just nodded and poured my coffee. After breakfast, I drove to Cooper's garage. He was already there, despite the early hour, working on his truck's engine with the focused intensity of a man who understood machinery better than people. "Need you to witness something," I said. "Now?" "Now." He wiped his hands on a rag and followed me to my truck. I pulled out the tape recorder and the notebook where I'd been documenting everything. "I'm going to make a recording, an affidavit of sorts. I need you to witness that it's me speaking, that I'm of sound mind, and that I'm not being coerced." Cooper studied me. "This about Georgia and the banker? This is about protecting what's mine. Then let's do it." I turned on the recorder, stated the date and time, identified myself and Cooper as witness. Then I laid it all out, calm and clear. The forged signatures, the fraudulent notary seal, the attempt to add the last acre as collateral without my knowledge, the affair between my wife and Ezra Taylor, their plan to steal the land my father had protected. When I finished, Cooper stated his name and confirmed he'd witnessed my statement. We signed and dated the notebook page where I'd written a summary. "What now?" Cooper asked. "Now I need you to drive me to the credit union, not the bank, the credit union." Plains Federal Credit Union sat on the other side of town from the bank, a small brick building that had served farmers since the 1930s. They had safety deposit boxes that the bank didn't know about and couldn't touch. I rented a box and placed inside it Dad's original deed to the last acre, the forged amendment document, my notebook of documentation, and the master tape of my statement. I kept copies of everything in a manila envelope. "If something happens to me," I told Cooper, "you know where this is." "Nothing's going to happen to you. Georgia and Ezra have $40,000 worth of reasons to want me out of the picture. Just remember where this is." We drove back to Cooper's garage, and I pulled out an index card where I'd written my battle plan. Target 1, forged amendment. Get notary to confirm fraud. Target 2, appraisal manipulation talk to original appraiser. Target 3, conflict of interest. Document pattern of meetings. "You planning a war?" Cooper asked. "A clean one, paper and witnesses only. In my experience, wars don't stay clean once they start. This one will. It has to." I drove to the insurance office next to the bank. Chloe Hernandez was at her desk, typing up a policy. She looked up when I walked in, smiled that professional smile that probably sold a lot of whole life policies. "Calvin, how can I help you?" I pulled out the photocopy of the amendment with her notary seal. "Did you notarize this?" She examined it, and I watched her face change from professional pleasant to confused to concerned. "This has my seal, but no, I didn't do this." "You're certain?" She pulled out her notary journal, a bound book where she recorded every document she notarized. "What's the date on this?" "March 15th. She flipped pages. "March 15th. I notarized 3 documents that day. A car title transfer for Betty Morrison, a power of attorney for Jim Daniels, and a hay purchase contract for the Gunderson farm. Nothing for you or the bank." "Look at the seal closer." She pulled out a magnifying glass from her desk drawer, studied the photocopy. "This is wrong. The font, this is from my old seal. I got new ones made last year when I renewed my commission, and the embossing is too shallow. Someone traced this or used a photocopy to make it look official. Would you be willing to sign an affidavit stating that?" "Calvin, if someone's forging my notary seal, that's a federal crime. Of course I'll sign an affidavit." We spent the next hour drafting her statement. She was thorough, noting 3 specific discrepancies between the forged seal and her actual seal. She made photocopies of pages from her notary journal showing what she'd actually notarized that day. She even pulled out her official seal and made a proper embossing on a blank paper to show the difference in depth and clarity. "Who would do this?" she asked as I was leaving. "Someone who thought paper was easier to forge than signatures." They thought wrong. My next stop was finding Lincoln Jackson, the appraiser who'd valued our farm 2 years ago before being suddenly replaced. He lived out past the cemetery, in a small house he'd built himself after retiring from the county assessor's office. Lincoln was in his garden, pulling early weeds despite the wet ground. He straightened up when he saw me, his back protesting audibly. "Calvin Miller. Haven't seen you since your dad's funeral." "Been a while, Lincoln. Can we talk?" "Come on up to the porch. My knees won't take much more of this gardening anyway." We sat in metal chairs that had seen better decades, looking out over his neat rows of planted vegetables. "Someone replaced you on our farm appraisal 2 years ago," I said. Lincoln nodded. "Moore and Thomas Valuation. Came in from the state capitol. Said the bank wanted a fresh perspective. Any idea why? I had my suspicions. My appraisal treated your land as a single farming unit, standard practice, but I heard Moore and Thomas broke it into parcels, valued each separately. Why would that matter?" "Because," Lincoln said, leaning forward, When you break up a farm's valuation, you can isolate certain parcels as more valuable. Makes them better collateral. That northwest section of yours, the last acre. That's prime land, never floods, perfect soil composition, road access on two sides. As part of your whole farm, it's just another field. Separated out, it's worth 3 times what the rest of your land is per acre. Would you be willing to put that in writing? I'll do you one better. He stood up, joints creaking. I kept copies of my original appraisal. Technically not supposed to, but 40 years in the assessment business teaches you to document everything. He went inside and came back with a file folder. Inside was his original appraisal, treating our farm as a single unit, and his notes about soil quality, drainage, and usage patterns. This shows the last acre as integral to your farming operation, he said. Separating it would be like cutting the heart out of the body. The farm wouldn't be viable without it. Can I get a copy of this? Take the original. I've got another copy. He paused. Calvin, someone's playing games with your land, aren't they? Someone's trying. Your father would come back from the grave to haunt anyone who touched that acre. I'm trying to handle it before that's necessary. I drove home with a folder full of ammunition, Chloe's affidavit about the forged notary seal, Lincoln's original appraisal, and my own growing documentation. But I needed one more thing. I needed to give Georgia a chance to come clean, to undo this before it went any further. Not for her sake, but so I could say I tried. She was in the garden when I got home, planting tomatoes in the plot we'd cleared last weekend, back when we were still pretending to be married. She looked up when my shadow fell across the turned earth. You're back early. Georgia, we need to talk. She stuck her trowel in the ground, stood up slowly. About what? About the last acre. About Ezra Taylor. About forged documents with my signature. For a moment, her face went completely blank, like a television switching off. Then she smiled, that same smile she'd used when the kids at church tracked mud into her clean kitchen. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out the photocopy of the amendment. This is what I'm talking about. She looked at it, then at me. That's your signature. No, it's not. And Chloe Hernandez didn't notarize it either. She's willing to testify to that. You're being paranoid, Calvin. This is about the farm stress, isn't it? Dr. Morrison said, stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. I know about the Fairview Motel. I know about you and Ezra. I know about the plan to steal the last acre and sell it to Anderson Ag Services. The mask finally slipped. For just a second, I saw fear in her eyes. Then it was replaced by something harder. You don't know anything. I know enough. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Ezra right now and tell him it's over. The affair, the plan, all of it. You're going to help me file paperwork to revoke any power of attorney that might be used to justify this forgery, and we're going to handle our divorce like civilized people. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think it's that simple? You think Ezra's just going to walk away? You don't know who you're dealing with. Neither do you. I pulled out my index card with the 3 targets listed. I've got sworn affidavits about the forged documents. I've got proof of the appraisal manipulation. I've got documentation of your affair affecting a business relationship with the bank. This ends now, or it ends in court. You wouldn't dare. The scandal would be on you and Ezra, not me. She stood there in her garden, dirt on her hands, looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time in years. You've changed, she said. No, I just stopped pretending not to see what was right in front of me. I need time to think. You have until Monday. That's when I meet with the bank president to lay all this out, with or without your cooperation. I turned to walk back to the house. Calvin. I stopped but didn't turn around. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. No, I agreed. It was supposed to happen quietly while I wasn't paying attention, while I trusted you. That evening we moved through the house like ghosts, occupying the same space but never touching, never really seeing each other. Georgia made dinner a simple soup, nothing special. We ate in silence. She went to bed early. I stayed up with Dad's ledger and my growing pile of evidence. At midnight, I made one last recording on my tape. Terms are set. No violence, No public humiliation unless forced. Just truth and paper and the law. The acre stays in the family. Everything else is negotiable. This is Calvin Miller, fighting a clean war for dirty reasons. I looked at my wedding ring, still sitting in the coffee saucer where I'd left it. 27 years reduced to a circle of gold collecting dust. But the last acre that was forever, that was worth fighting for. Tomorrow I'd make copies of everything, file them with Daisy at the courthouse and with my lawyer in the next county, set up safeguards and redundancies, because Cooper was right, wars don't stay clean once they start. But for tonight, I sat in my father's chair, looking out at the last acre under the stars, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Ready. Cooper checked the tape recorder for the third time, popping open the back to verify the batteries were fresh. "These are brand new Duracells," he said. "Should give you 90 minutes, maybe more." "The meeting won't last that long," I said, straightening my tie in the rearview mirror. It was the same tie I'd worn to Dad's funeral, dark blue with thin gray stripes. Seemed appropriate for another kind of death. "You sure you don't want me to come in with you? You'll be more useful as backup. If I'm not out in an hour, you come looking." It was Monday, noon sharp. The Plains County Bank parking lot was fuller than usual, farmers making their weekly deposits, elderly folks cashing Social Security checks, normal people doing normal business, unaware that Room 12 at the Fairview Motel had hosted my wife and her banker boyfriend 4 times in the last 2 weeks. I patted my shirt pocket. Tape recorder, index card with my 3 targets, a copy of Chloe's affidavit folded neat. The originals were safe in the credit union box. "Never show your whole hand," Dad used to say. "Make them wonder what else you're holding." The bank lobby smelled like furniture polish and that particular mixture of paper and anxiety that all banks share. Ezra Taylor stood by the teller windows, talking to a young farmer I recognized, Jim Paulson, who'd bought the Hendricks place last year. Ezra's hand rested on Jim's shoulder, friendly and paternal, the same way it had rested on mine. "Calvin!" Ezra's voice boomed across the lobby. Several heads turned. "Right on time. I appreciate punctuality in a man." "Ezra." I nodded, kept my voice neutral. "Jim here was just telling me about his expansion plans. Exciting times for Plains County agriculture." He squeezed Jim's shoulder. "We'll get you set up with that equipment loan, don't you worry." Jim thanked him and left, looking relieved. Another farmer caught in the web, thinking the spider was his friend. "Shall we?" Ezra gestured toward his office. The glass-walled office felt like a fishbowl. Everyone could see us but not hear us modern management theory at work. Ezra had arranged 3 chairs around his desk. The third one made my stomach tighten. Georgia walked in 30 seconds later, wearing the navy dress she'd bought for our 25th anniversary. She didn't look at me, just took her seat and smoothed her skirt over her knees. "Wonderful," Ezra said, settling behind his desk like a king on his throne. "Now we can discuss the restructuring properly. Coffee?" "No, thank you," I said. "Georgia?" "I'm fine." Ezra pulled out a folder thick with documents. "I've put together what I think is a very generous consolidation package. It addresses your current obligations while providing flexibility for future operations." He slid papers across the desk. Dense legal language swam across the pages, but certain phrases jumped out: security interest, acceleration clause, power of sale. "Walk me through it," I said, pulling out my own notebook like I was taking notes. What I was really doing was clicking the recorder on in my pocket. The tiny red light glowed through the fabric, but Ezra was too busy showing off to notice. "It's quite straightforward. We consolidate your operating loan, the equipment note, and that small improvement loan from 85 into one instrument. Lower interest rate, longer term. And the collateral? Well, that's where we need to be realistic about asset valuation." He pulled out an appraisal Moore and Thomas valuation, dated just last week. "Your farm's value has shifted. Some parcels are worth more than others now." "Such as?" "That northwest section. Superior soil quality, excellent drainage, road access. It's worth nearly as much as the rest of your holdings combined." "The last acre." "Charming name. Yes, that would become primary collateral. It makes the entire package work, frankly." Georgia shifted in her chair. I could feel her watching me, waiting for the explosion. But I just nodded, Wrote something in my notebook. I'll need to review all this, I said. Take it home. Go through it carefully. Ezra's smile tightened. I'm afraid that's not possible. Bank policy requires all restructuring documents to remain on premises until execution. Security reasons, you understand. That's not how we've done business before. New policies from corporate. But you're welcome to review everything here. Take all the time you need. He was good. I had to give him that. Keeping the documents here meant I couldn't show them to a lawyer, couldn't compare them to our existing loans, couldn't prove the manipulation without the originals. This homestead release, I said, pointing to a page near the back. That's new. Standard language. Georgia needs to sign as well, acknowledging the restructure of secured assets, including the last acre, including all agricultural assets as defined in Schedule A. I looked at Georgia for the first time since she'd walked in. You understand what you're signing? She met my eyes, and for just a moment I saw the woman I'd married, young, uncertain, looking to me for guidance. Then Ezra cleared his throat, and the moment passed. I understand we need to do what's best for the farm, she said. And you think this is best? Putting the last acre at risk? The acre's not at risk if you make your payments, Ezra interjected. This actually protects it by ensuring the farm's overall viability. That's one interpretation. It's the bank's interpretation. I leaned back, making a show of thinking it over. Tell me, Ezra, how many farms have you restructured since you arrived? Several. It's part of modernizing our agricultural portfolio. And how many of those farms are still operational? His smile faltered slightly. Market conditions have been challenging. That's not an answer. 4 out of 7 are still operating. And the other 3? Were liquidated through voluntary or involuntary proceedings. Involuntary meaning foreclosure. If you want to use that term, I made another note. And what happened to those farms' prime parcels? The ones you isolated as primary collateral? George's hand moved to her throat, fingers finding the cross necklace she always wore when nervous. They were sold to satisfy outstanding obligations, Ezra said carefully. To whom? Various buyers, agricultural investment firms mostly. Anderson Ag Services? Something flickered in his eyes. Among others. Interesting business model. Restructure loans with prime parcels as collateral, wait for default, sell to agricultural investors. The bank makes its money, the investors get prime land, everybody wins, except the farmers. That's a very cynical interpretation, Calvin. Is it inaccurate? He didn't answer, just shuffled papers with hands that weren't quite steady. I pulled out my index card, pretended to consult it. I need some clarification before I sign anything. First, this appraisal from Moore and Thomas. Why did they replace Lincoln Jackson? We periodically rotate appraisers to ensure objective valuations. Lincoln says he was specifically told not to separate the last acre from the overall farm valuation. Lincoln is mistaken. He has documentation. Ezra's jaw tightened. Documentation of what exactly? His original appraisal treating the farm as a single unit says separating the last acre makes the rest of the farm non-viable. Appraisals are opinions. Moore and Thomas has a different opinion. Based on what? They spent 20 minutes on my property. They're highly qualified professionals who happen to generate appraisals that support your restructuring model. The office felt smaller, the air thicker. Georgia hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but I could feel her tension like electricity before a storm. Calvin, Ezra said, leaning forward with practiced sincerity, I understand this is stressful. Change always is. But this restructuring is genuinely in your best interest. The alternative is continuing with your current obligations, which frankly are becoming unsustainable. Unsustainable because of fees and charges that didn't exist 2 years ago. Market conditions. Market conditions didn't add a $500 portfolio assessment fee last month, or a $300 document preparation charge the month before. He spread his hands. Banking has costs. So does farming. Difference is, I can't invent new costs whenever I need extra revenue. No one's inventing anything. No? Then explain this. I pulled out a bank statement from 6 months ago. September statement shows a balance of $47,000, October shows $52,000. No draws on the credit line, no new loans, just fees and interest rate adjustments. Your rate is variable. My rate is supposed to be prime plus 2. Prime didn't go up 5% in 1 month. There may have been an error. May have been? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Ezra, you're asking me to put my family's heritage as collateral based on numbers you're not even sure about? Georgia finally spoke. Calvin, you're being difficult. I'm being careful. There's a difference. The bank's trying to help us. The bank's trying to help itself to the last acre. That's paranoid. Is it? I turned to her fully. Tell me, Georgia, how much is Anderson Ag Services offering for that acreage? I'm curious about the exact number. The silence that followed was like the pause between lightning and thunder. Georgia's face went white. Ezra's went red. I don't know what you're implying, Ezra said slowly. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking a simple question. Has Anderson Ag Services expressed interest in purchasing the last acre if it becomes available? That's confidential banking information. It's my land we're talking about. Not if you default. There it was. The mask slipping. The real game showing through. So you admit there's already a buyer lined up. I admit nothing. I'm simply stating facts about collateral law. I stood up, gathering my notebook. I need time to review this properly. The documents stay here. Then I'll review them here, tomorrow, with my lawyer. Ezra's eye twitched. That's not necessary. Apparently it is. Calvin. Georgia stood too, reaching for my arm. I stepped away before she could touch me. Please, just sign the papers. Stop making this harder than it needs to be. Harder for whom? She looked at Ezra, then back at me. For everyone. Not for Anderson Ag Services. This is working out perfectly for them. I headed for the door, then turned back. One more thing, Ezra. That amendment dated March 15th, adding the last acre as collateral, has that been filed with the county? He blinked rapidly. What amendment? The one with my signature, or what looks like my signature. All documents are filed according to proper procedures. That's interesting, because County Clerk Daisy Wilson says nothing's been filed. Perhaps there's a processing delay. Perhaps someone's waiting for the right moment to file fraudulent paperwork. That's a serious accusation. Yes, I agreed. It is. I walked out, leaving them standing there in their glass office. The tape recorder in my pocket was still running, had captured every word. But it felt wrong, incomplete. We danced around the truth without ever touching it. In the parking lot, Cooper was leaning against his truck, pretending to read a newspaper. How'd it go? I pulled out the recorder, clicked it off. 28 minutes of conversation, and then nothing. The tape had run out. The last 2 minutes, the confrontation about the amendment, Ezra's near admission about Anderson Ag Services gone. Shit. What? Tape ran out. Missed the best part. Cooper looked at the recorder, then at me. 30-minute tape and a 90-minute recorder. Someone switched them. I thought about Georgia in the house that morning up before me, moving through the kitchen while I was in the shower. Time enough to find the recorder, switch the tapes. She knew, I said. She knew I'd be recording. What now? Now we do this the hard way. I looked back at the bank, at the glass office where Georgia and Ezra were probably planning their next move. They thought they were smart, switching the tape, controlling the documents, keeping everything in their arena. But they'd made one mistake. They'd confirmed Anderson Ag Services was interested. They'd confirmed the amendment existed. They'd confirmed they were waiting to file it. The tape might have run out, but I'd heard enough. And sometimes, what people don't say is more important than what they do. Come on, I told Cooper. We need to visit Daisy Wilson. Time to put some more facts on paper. As we drove away, I saw Georgia's face in the bank window watching. For a moment, she looked like the girl I'd married, scared and uncertain, trapped between two lives. Then Ezra's hand appeared on her shoulder and she turned away. 2 minutes. That's all I'd missed. 2 minutes that might have ended this clean and quick. Now it would be neither. Cooper's garage smelled like motor oil and WD-40, the perfume of honest work. He had the answering machine tape stretched between two pencil erasers, examining it like evidence at a crime scene, which I supposed it was. "This is magnetic tape," he said, adjusting his magnifying glass. "Same stuff I use to diagnose engine sounds. You can copy it, but you need the right equipment." "You have the right equipment? Does a bear shit in the woods?" He pulled out a dual-deck recorder that looked like it had survived Vietnam. "This baby's copied everything from Hendrix bootlegs to harvest forecasts. Your marriage problems are child's play." While Cooper worked his magic with the tapes, I spread out my evidence on his workbench. The forged amendment. Forged. Chloe's affidavit. Lincoln's original appraisal. Bank statements showing the mysterious fee increases. Each document was a bullet, but I needed a gun to fire them. "You know what your problem is?" Cooper said, connecting cables between machines. "You're fighting their fight, in their arena, with their rules. It's the only arena there is." "Bullshit. You need witnesses, public record. Make them fight in daylight instead of back rooms." The machine clicked and whirred, transferring the conversation from my answering machine to a fresh cassette. Ezra's voice, thin and metallic through the small speaker. "I'll bring the folder. You bring your signature." "That's admission of conspiracy right there," Cooper said. "It's admission of a meeting. Any lawyer would tear it apart." "Then get better evidence." "How?" Cooper grinned. "Same way I diagnosed that knock in Henderson's truck. You trace it to the source." An hour later, I was at the county courthouse with Daisy Wilson. She'd stayed late again, the glow from her desk lamp the only light in the basement office. "You look like hell, Calvin. People keep telling me that." "Well, they're right." She pulled out a fresh legal pad. "What do you need?" "I need to understand something." I showed her the forged amendment again. "If this gets filed, what happens?" "Officially, it becomes part of the public record. The bank can enforce it." "And unofficially?" Daisy leaned back in her chair, which squeaked in protest. "Unofficially, if it's filed late on a Friday, it might not get caught until Monday. By then, the bank could have already initiated foreclosure proceedings. You'd have to prove fraud to stop it, and that takes time." Time I wouldn't have. Exactly. So they're waiting for the right moment. That'd be my guess. She pulled out a rubber stamp, pressed it onto an ink pad. "But here's something they might not know. Every document that comes through here gets logged twice, once in our computer system and once in my personal ledger." She showed me a leather-bound book, pages filled with her neat handwriting. "This is my insurance policy," she said. 30 years of every document that's crossed my desk. Times, dates, who filed what. It's not official, but it saved my ass more than once when the computer system crashed." "Can you flag the Miller documents?" "Already have." She showed me a page with red tabs. "Every document related to your property for the last 5 years. Notice anything?" I studied the entries. Regular filings for harvest contracts, equipment liens, standard stuff. Then, starting 18 months ago, a pattern. Documents filed by the bank, then withdrawn or amended, like someone was testing the system. "They've been practicing," I said. "That's how I read it. Small filings to see how the system works, what gets noticed, what doesn't." "Can you make me a copy of this?" "I can do better." She pulled out a notary stamp. "I can make you a certified copy, attested to by the county clerk. That makes it admissible as evidence." While Daisy prepared the documents, I drove out to the Fairview Motel. It was dusk, that in-between time when headlights don't quite help, but you need them anyway. The motel squatted beside the highway like always, but now I noticed things. Security camera over the office door, but it was pointed at the parking lot, not the rooms. Ice machine at the end of the building. Perfect cover for watching the back rooms. Payphone by the road where someone could make calls without going through the office. I parked at the abandoned Sinclair station across the highway and waited. At 7:15, a familiar burgundy Cutlass pulled into the motel lot. Georgia, right on schedule. She parked in the back, walked to room 12 without hesitation. She had a key. 10 minutes later, Ezra's Lincoln arrived. He parked 3 spaces down. Like that somehow made it less obvious. He knocked once, slipped inside. I pulled out my camera, the good Nikon I'd bought for our 20th anniversary. Telephoto lens, fast film. Click, click, click. The door closing behind him. The room number clear in the frame, both cars in the same shot. Then I did something stupid, or smart. I still can't decide. I walked across the highway to the payphone and called room 12. It rang 4 times before Georgia answered. Hello? It's me. Silence. Then, what do you want? I want to give you another chance, both of you. Drop the amendment, call off Anderson Ag Services, and we all walk away. You're out of your mind. I have Chloe's affidavit about the forged notary seal, Lincoln's original appraisal, photos of you two at this motel, tape recordings of Ezra discussing the folder and signatures. You have nothing that would hold up in court. Maybe not, but I have enough to make life very uncomfortable. For both of you. Muffled conversation in the background. Then Ezra's voice. Calvin, this is harassment. I'll have you arrested. For making a phone call? Good luck with that. What do you want? I told you. Drop it. All of it. And if we don't? Then I take everything to the bank president tomorrow, along with the state banking commission and the county prosecutor. You'd destroy your own wife's reputation. My wife destroyed her own reputation. I'm just documenting it. More muffled conversation. Then Georgia. We need time to discuss this. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow. That's when the bank opens, and that's when I start making this official. I hung up and walked back to my truck. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from the clarity that comes when you finally stop pretending things might work out. Back at Cooper's garage, we made copies of everything. One set for the credit union box, one for Cooper's safe, one for my lawyer in the next county. Redundancy like backup generators during harvest. Because when the storm hits, you want multiple ways to keep the lights on. You missed something, Cooper said, looking through the documents. What? Witnesses to their meetings, the motel clerk, other bank employees, people who've seen things but haven't been asked about them. He was right. I'd been so focused on documents I'd forgotten about people. We spent the next 2 hours making a list. The motel clerk, Cooper's cousin Darlene, who worked nights. Molly Johnson, the bank teller who always seemed nervous when Ezra and Georgia were in the building together. The cleaning lady at the bank who came in after hours. The kid who delivered pizzas and might have seen cars where they shouldn't be. Tomorrow's going to be interesting, Cooper said. Tomorrow's going to be war. I drove home through empty streets. The house was dark, Georgia still at the motel or maybe at her sister's. I didn't much care which. I sat at the kitchen table with Dad's ledger and added tonight's entry, April 25th, 1988. Evidence copied and distributed G&ET given final warning. Multiple witnesses identified. Tomorrow it goes public. The phone rang at 11:47. I let the machine get it. Calvin. George's voice, tired and small. We need more time. This is complicated. The machine clicked off. Message received. They wanted more time to destroy evidence, to cover tracks, to figure out how much I really knew versus what I was bluffing about. I pulled out a fresh tape, put it in the recorder, and made one more statement. This is Calvin Miller. It's 11:52 p.m. on April 25th, 1988. Tomorrow morning, I'm taking everything to the authorities. My wife, Georgia, and Ezra Taylor have been given multiple opportunities to stop their attempt to steal the last acre. They've declined. What happens next is on them. I turned off the recorder and went to bed. For the first time in weeks, I slept straight through until dawn, because the waiting was over. Tomorrow, the war would begin in earnest, and I had something they didn't expect: witnesses willing to talk, documents they didn't know existed, and the kind of determination that comes from defending what 3 generations of Millers had built. The last acre would stay in the family, even if the family itself was destroyed in the process. The county records room smelled like old paper and mildew, 40 years of farm deals rotting slow in metal cabinets. Daisy Wilson pulled out a folder thick as a hymnal, dust motes dancing in the fluorescent light as she laid it on the scarred wooden table. Your father filed this in 1975, she said, sliding a yellow document across to me. I remember because it was right after he'd been diagnosed. First time, anyway. The paper was onion skin thin, the kind they used for carbon copies back when that mattered. At the top, in Dad's careful script, Memorandum of Intent regarding Parcel 47B. I read it 3 times before the words sank in. Let it be known that Parcel 47B, commonly called the last acre, is to remain separate from all encumbrances on the Miller farm, unless Calvin Miller, my son and heir, signs in person before the county clerk. This is my intent as owner, and should be considered by all parties in any future transactions. His signature sat at the bottom, notarized by Daisy herself, 13 years younger, but the same steady hand. It's not legally binding, Daisy said, but it shows intent. Any judge would take it seriously. He never told me about this. Your father was a chess player, Calvin, always thinking 3 moves ahead. She pulled out another folder, this one newer. Speaking of chess, I did some digging on your banker friend. The papers inside told a story. 4 farms Ezra had restructured in the last 2 years, 3 in foreclosure within 18 months. Each one had a prime parcel separated out in the appraisal. Each one ended up with Anderson Ag Services. Pattern and practice, Daisy said. That's what lawyers call it. That's what I call theft with a calculator. Cooper appeared in the doorway, knocking mud off his boots. Calvin, you need to see this. He handed me a printout from the state records office. Ezra Taylor had filed a second mortgage on his own house 6 months ago. $40,000 borrowed against a property worth maybe $60,000. Man's in debt up to his eyeballs, Cooper said. Probably gets a finder's fee every time Anderson picks up a prime parcel. The pieces clicked together like combine parts. Ezra wasn't just helping Georgia steal the last acre he needed it. His own financial mess made him desperate enough to forge documents, desperate enough to risk his banking license. There's more, Daisy said. She pulled out another document. Everly Martin, Georgia's sister. She's been doing the books at church, right? I nodded. Georgia's been listed as helping with bank outreach for the last 4 months. Paid position. $50 a week from the Community Development Fund. The bank sponsors that fund, I said. The bank controls that fund. Ezra Taylor specifically. So Georgia wasn't just having an affair. She was on the payroll. Every angle covered, every base touched. Except they didn't know about Dad's memorandum, sitting in a basement file for 13 years like a landmine waiting to explode. That afternoon, I drove out to Lincoln Jackson's place. The old appraiser was on his porch, watching the clouds build in the west. Calvin Miller, he said. Figured you'd show up eventually. You know why I'm here? Same reason Moore and Thomas showed up last week, asking if I'd kept copies of your appraisal. He smiled, thin as wire. Told them I couldn't recall. But you did keep copies. Every damn page. He went inside, came back with a folder. Your farm works as a unit, always has. That northwest section, your last acre, it's the keystone. Water rights, access roads, soil quality. Take that away, the rest of the farm becomes 40% less viable. Will you swear to that? Already did. He handed me a notarized affidavit. Dated it yesterday. Figured you'd need it official. I read through his statement. Clear, precise, devastating to any claim that separating the last acre made financial sense. Why'd they pull you off the appraisal? I asked. Because I wouldn't play ball. Same reason they brought in Moore and Thomas. Those boys would appraise a puddle as lakefront property if the bank asked nice enough. Or paid enough. That too. As I was leaving, Lincoln called out, Your daddy would be proud, Calvin, fighting with paper instead of fists. That was always his way. I drove home through back roads, avoiding town, avoiding the chance of seeing George's car or Ezra's. The radio played farm reports, corn down, wheat holding, rain expected. Normal news for normal people living normal lives. The mailbox flag was up when I got home. Inside, a single typed page, no signature. You want daylight? Ask for the motel ledger for March 3rd and April 12th. March 3rd was the day Georgia started her book club. April 12th was the day she'd said she was visiting her cousin in Lincoln. The cousin who, when I'd called last week, hadn't seen Georgia in 2 years. I sat at the kitchen table with Dad's ledger, adding today's evidence to the growing pile. His memorandum, Lincoln's affidavit, Ezra's second mortgage, Georgia's bank payments, each document another round in the chamber waiting to be fired. The phone rang. I let it ring. The machine clicked on. Calvin. Georgia's voice, trying to sound normal. We need to talk. About the farm. About everything. I'll be home late tonight. She'd be home from wherever she really went these days. Maybe the motel, maybe Ezra's house, maybe just driving country roads trying to figure out how to steal what 3 generations had built. I picked up Dad's memorandum again, held it to the light. The watermark in the paper read, Trust, the brand of paper the courthouse used in the 70s. Trust. What a concept. Dad's margin notes in the ledger caught my eye. Keep the acre whole, written in pencil, faded but still readable, like he knew someday someone would try to break it apart. Cooper called around 9 p.m. Found something else. That kid who delivers pizza, Tommy Henderson, he says he's delivered to room 12 at the Fairview 3 times in the last month. Always paid cash, always a man's hand taking the pizza, woman's voice in the background. Georgia doesn't eat pizza, says the cheese upsets her stomach. People do all kinds of things they don't normally do when they're in motel rooms. I wrote it all down. Times, dates, witnesses, building a case one fact at a time, the way Dad taught me to build fence post by post, wire stretched tight. Georgia came home at 11:30. I heard her car, heard her keys in the lock, that same brass key that remembered everything. She went straight upstairs, no stop in the kitchen, no checking to see if I was awake. I sat in the dark with Dad's papers spread around me like a map of betrayal. Tomorrow I'd go to the motel, get those ledger pages. Tomorrow I'd have enough proof to force the bank's hand. But tonight, I held Dad's memorandum and remembered him signing it, weak from chemo but still thinking ahead, still protecting what mattered. Some things you inherit, he'd said near the end. Some things you guard. The last acre was both. Chapter 3. The Fairview motel manager was a thin man named Gonzalez, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on a Tuesday morning. His office smelled like burnt coffee and disappointment. "I can't just show you the ledger," he said. "Privacy laws." Cooper leaned against the doorframe. "We're not asking for credit card numbers, just need to confirm 2 dates. March 3rd and April 12th, I added. Gonzalez's eye twitched. Those specific dates? Those specific dates. He pulled out a leather-bound ledger, the kind they'd used before computers ate everything. His finger traced down columns of handwritten names and room numbers. I could lose my job. "You could," Cooper agreed. "Or you could help a man save his farm from thieves." Gonzalez looked at me, then at the window where the morning sun hit the parking lot. Room 12 was visible from here, curtains drawn tight. "5 minutes," he said, sliding the ledger across. "I'm going for coffee." March 3rd. E. Taylor, room 12, cash paid, check out noon next day. April 12th. E. Taylor, room 12, cash paid, check out 2 p.m. next day. Both times, someone had written in the margin, "Guest requested extra towels." Cooper took photos while I copied the information into my notebook. When Gonzalez came back, I slid a 20 across the desk. "For the coffee," I said. "Don't come back," he replied, but his eyes said good luck. At the bank, I asked to see Mr. Martin directly. The receptionist looked nervous. Everyone knew something was happening, even if they didn't know what. Martin's office was old school, wood paneling and photos of his kids at various ages. He'd been bank president since before Ezra arrived, one of the last local boys in management. "Calvin," he said, not getting up. "I expected you sooner." I laid it all out on his desk. Lincoln's affidavit, Dad's memorandum, the motel ledger copies, Daisy's documentation of the pattern of foreclosures, the anonymous tip that had led me to the motel dates. Martin read each document slowly, his face getting grayer with each page. "This is serious," he said finally. "It's theft. It's alleged theft. But yes, serious enough." He pulled out a pad of bank letterhead. "I'm ordering a freeze on any action regarding your loans, effective immediately. No filings, no transfers, no modifications without my personal approval." "What about Ezra?" "That's an internal matter. It's a criminal matter." Martin's jaw tightened. "One step at a time, Calvin. This freeze gives us breathing room to investigate properly." "How long?" 30 days initially. Longer if needed." He wrote out the freeze order, signed it, stamped it with the bank seal. "I'll have copies sent to the county clerk and to Anderson Ag Services. They already have a buyer lined up." Not anymore, they don't. I left the bank with the freeze order in my pocket, feeling like I'd won something. But Cooper, waiting by the truck, saw it different. They'll fight back, he said. Cornered animals always do. He was right. By the time I got home, Georgia's car was gone. Not just gone for errands, gone with boxes in the back, gone with her good coat missing from the closet, gone with the jewelry box that had sat on our dresser since our wedding. A note on the kitchen table. Staying with Everly. Will be in touch through lawyers. I called the church. Everly answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting. She's here, she said. And before you say anything, she's my sister. I wasn't going to say anything. Just wanted to know she's safe. Safe from what? You? You're the one who's destroying everything, Calvin. This paranoia about the bank, it's not paranoia when they're really trying to steal from you. Georgia would never. Georgia already has. I've got proof. Silence. Then, she's staying here. Don't come by. The church turned next. That evening, Reverend Morrison called to say I'd been temporarily relieved of my usher duties while personal matters resolved. The grain elevator sent a letter tightening my credit terms. The feed store, where I'd bought supplies for 20 years, suddenly needed cash up front. Word travels fast in a small town. By Wednesday, I was radioactive, but the freeze held. Daisy called to confirm she'd received it and logged it officially. Anyone tries to file anything about your property, it'll get flagged immediately, she said. You bought yourself time. Time for what, though? Georgia was gone. The community was choosing sides, and I was sitting in an empty house with nothing but paper proof of betrayal. Thursday evening, I was in the barn checking equipment when I saw them orange survey stakes driven into the ground along the last acre's boundary. Fresh stakes, bright flags fluttering in the wind. I called Daisy. Can they survey during a freeze? Surveying isn't filing, it's preparation. Preparation for what? For the minute that freeze lifts. I walked the line of stakes, counting them, every 50 feet, marking the boundary of what they planned to take. At the corner stake, someone had tied an extra flag. Written on it in black marker, "Coming soon, Anderson Ag Services." I pulled that stake up, brought it to the house. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. Cooper came by that night with a six-pack and news. Molly at the bank talked to me, off the record. Says Ezra's been moving files after hours, using the computer system to backdate entries. Can she prove it? She's scared, but she's thinking about it. We sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the last acre. Without the survey stakes, it looked normal. Just good soil waiting for seed, same as it had for decades. You know what you've started, right? Cooper said. This won't end clean. It was never going to end clean, not once they forged my signature. I mean for you. Win or lose, this farm won't feel the same. He was right. The house already felt different with Georgia gone. The land felt different knowing someone had marked it for taking. Even the air felt different, charged with conflict instead of calm. Dad would understand, I said. Your dad would have shot someone by now. No, Dad would have done exactly what I'm doing. He just would have done it quieter. The phone rang inside. I let the machine get it. Calvin. Ezra's voice trying to sound official. The freeze is temporary. The bank's rights remain intact. We should discuss resolution before this becomes more public. More public, like the whole town didn't already know. I pulled out Dad's ledger, wrote down the day's events. Survey stakes discovered. Georgia moved out. Community choosing sides. Ezra making threats. Tomorrow would bring more paper, more proof, more problems. But tonight, I had a freeze order, a growing pile of evidence, and 30 days to save what my father had protected with his dying breath. The win tasted like dust, but it was still a win. For now. The red-striped envelope arrived with Monday's mail, registered delivery, signature required. The postal carrier, Jenny Patterson, who'd been on this route 12 years, wouldn't meet my eyes. Sorry, Calvin, she mumbled, handing me the pen. Inside was a notice of assignment. Plains County Bank had transferred servicing of my loans to Anderson Ag Servicing, effective immediately. The small print at the bottom, all remedies preserved. I drove straight to the courthouse. Daisy was at her desk, but her face told me she already knew. They filed it at the state level, she said, pulling up her computer screen. UCC1 submitted electronically last night at 11:47 p.m. lists your entire loan portfolio as transferred, including liens on crops, equipment, and, she paused, homestead parcel, commonly known as Parcel 47B. The freeze should have stopped this. The freeze was internal to the bank. They assigned the servicing to get around it. She printed out the state filing. It's legal, Calvin. Shady as hell, but legal. So Anderson can foreclose? Anderson can do whatever the loan terms allow, and with that forged amendment in play, it hasn't been filed. Yet. I studied the UCC1 filing. Every asset I owned was listed, down to the serial numbers on my tractors. Someone had done their homework. Someone who knew exactly what they were hunting. Can I dispute this? You can file a UCC5 correction statement. Won't stop them, but it puts your objection on record. We spent an hour drafting the correction, citing the freeze, the forged documents, the pending investigation. Daisy filed it electronically, printed copies, stamped everything with enough official seals to choke a horse. This is a speed bump, she said, not a wall. Back at the farm, a white pickup was parked by the last acre. Moore and Thomas valuation logo on the door. A man with a clipboard was taking photos, making notes. Can I help you? I called out. He didn't look up. Just doing a drive-by assessment for Anderson. There's a freeze on this property. Not anymore. He handed me a business card. Anderson Ag Servicing has assumed servicing rights. We're updating the collateral assessment. Based on what authority? Based on the authority of holding your note. He smiled like a man who enjoyed his work. Have a nice day, Mr. Miller. He drove off slow, dust clouding behind him. I memorized his license plate, wrote it in my notebook. Another fact for the pile. The phone was ringing when I got inside. A voice smooth as oil, professional and cold. Mr. Miller? This is James Rodriguez from Anderson Ag Servicing. I understand there's been some confusion about your loan status. No confusion, just fraud. That's a serious allegation. We've reviewed the documentation and everything appears to be in order. However, we'd like to offer you an opportunity to restructure under our management. Not interested. You haven't heard the terms. We could meet today, go over everything, send it in writing. We prefer to handle these matters in person, more efficient. I prefer paper trails. A pause. Mr. Miller, we're trying to help you here. The alternative is strict enforcement of the loan terms as written. The loan terms as forged, you mean? We have documentation that says otherwise. Properly notarized, properly executed. You might want to reconsider your position. He hung up soft, like a threat whispered in church. Cooper arrived an hour later with worse news. Georgia's been making the rounds. Coffee shop, beauty parlor, church social committee, telling everyone you're having a breakdown, stress from the farm, paranoid about the bank. She's got people believing you're unstable. Let me guess, confused by paperwork? That's the phrase. Says you've always had trouble with complex documents. That's why she had to help with the banking. The setup was elegant. Paint me as unstable, establish Georgia as the competent one, then who would believe I could spot a forged signature? Who would take my side against a banker and a devoted wife? There's more, Cooper said. Ezra's been moved to special projects, not fired. Still has his bank access, still has his keys. Martin froze everything. Martin's getting pressure from corporate. Word is they're not happy about the freeze. That evening, I sat with the evidence, arranging and rearranging it like puzzle pieces. The assignment to Anderson was the counterpunch, but it was also desperate. They'd exposed themselves, shown their connection clearly. No more hiding behind banking regulations and privacy laws. I pulled out fresh paper, started a new timeline. Every date, every document, every player in the game. The pattern emerged clear as fence lines. They'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. George's affair with Ezra wasn't just personal, it was strategic. The phone rang. I answered this time. Calvin? Molly from the bank, whispering. I can't talk long. They're watching everyone who might help you. What do you know? The assignment to Anderson, it was prepared weeks ago, just waiting for the right moment. And Calvin, There are more loans being packaged the same way. Yours is just the test case. How many more? 7 farms, all with prime parcels. If this works with you, they'll roll out the rest. Will you testify to this? A long pause. I have kids, Calvin, a mortgage. I can't lose this job. I understand. But I'll keep watching, and if I can help without being seen. Thank you. After she hung up, I stood at the window looking out at the last acre. The survey stakes were back, planted in the same holes like they'd never been removed, orange flags catching the last light of day, marking the boundaries of what they planned to steal. Tomorrow Anderson would probably make their next move. Legal notices, payment demands, something to force default. They had the assignment, had the paper trail even if it was built on forgery. But I had something too, a growing list of witnesses, even reluctant ones, a pattern of behavior that went beyond one farm. And somewhere in Ezra's desperate maneuvering, he'd make a mistake. They always did when they got greedy. I wrote in Dad's ledger, "War has escalated. Enemy has revealed their full force. Time to show ours." Sunday afternoon, 2 p.m. sharp. I heard the cars before I saw them, Georgia's Cutlass, followed by a black sedan I didn't recognize. They parked like they owned the place, which I suppose was what this was about. Georgia came in without knocking, Everly right behind her. The third person was a lawyer, Jackson and Wilson, according to his card, young and serious in a suit too heavy for the weather. "Calvin," Georgia said, formal as a stranger, "we need to discuss the situation." "The situation where you're trying to steal my land?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Miller, inflammatory statements won't help anyone. We're here to find a reasonable solution." They arranged themselves at my kitchen table where Dad had taught me to read, where Mom had rolled out pie crusts, where Georgia and I had signed our first loan papers 20 years ago. Now it was a courtroom. "First," the lawyer said, pulling out documents, "we need an inventory of all marital assets. The farm's not a marital asset, it's inherited property. The improvements made during marriage, the equipment purchased, the loans taken, all marital decisions." Georgia finally looked at me directly. "Calvin, you're not well. This paranoia about the bank, these accusations, Dr. Morrison thinks you need help." "Dr. Morrison hasn't been my doctor in 5 years. He's still concerned. The whole community is concerned." Everly leaned forward. "Calvin, we've known each other for 30 years. This isn't like you. The man who taught my kids Sunday school wouldn't act this way. The man who taught your kids wouldn't steal from them either." The lawyer slid a paper across the table. "This is a temporary post-nuptial agreement. It separates household accounts for everyone's protection while matters are resolved." I read it carefully. Hidden in the legal language was a poison pill signing would acknowledge Georgia's equal interest in all farm operations and decisions. Not signing anything. "Calvin," Georgia's voice went soft, the tone she used when trying to manage me. "If you won't be reasonable, we'll have to take other steps, for your own good." My own good? Like forging my signature was for my own good? The lawyer stiffened. "That's a serious accusation requiring proof." I pulled out the motel ledger copies, set them on the table. March 3rd, April 12th, room 12. Your client and Ezra Taylor. Georgia didn't flinch. "Those were church planning meetings. Ezra's on the finance committee." In a motel room, with extra towels. The church couldn't afford conference space. Ezra volunteered to pay for a meeting room. "Room 12 isn't a meeting room. It's got one queen bed and a broken ice machine outside the door." Everly gasped. Georgia's composure finally cracked, just for a second, before she rebuilt it. "You've been stalking me? I've been documenting fraud." The lawyer gathered his papers. "Mr. Miller, I advise you to seek counsel, and perhaps medical attention. This obsessive behavior, get out." They stood to leave, but Georgia turned at the door. "The restraining order will be filed tomorrow. Stay away from the bank. Stay away from Ezra. Stay away from me. This is still my house. For now." They left me sitting at the table where everything had once been simple and true. The restraining order was theater, but effective theater. Poor Georgia, threatened by her unstable husband. The whole town would eat it up with their morning coffee. That evening I went to church. Habit more than hope, but I needed something normal. something that hadn't been poisoned yet. I was wrong. Reverend Morrison intercepted me at the door. "Calvin, perhaps it would be better if you sat out tonight's service. I've been coming here for 40 years, and we appreciate that, but given the current tensions, we think it's best to give everyone some space." Behind him, I could see the congregation filing in. The Hendersons, the Paulsons, the Johnsons, all people I'd known my whole life. Some met my eyes with pity. Most looked away. Everly was there, whispering to the church treasurer. Georgia sat in our usual pew, my family's pew, for 3 generations, hands folded, playing the wounded wife to perfection. I left. Cooper was waiting by my truck. Figured they'd pull something like this. Come on, let's get a beer. It's Sunday. Jesus turned water into wine. Pretty sure he'd understand. We drove to Cooper's garage, sat in his office with the smell of motor oil and honest work. He pulled 2 beers from the mini-fridge, handed me one. "My wife called," he said. "Bank's threatening to review our business loan. Amazing how that happens right when I'm helping you." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I told them to pound sand. Shop's paid off, has been for 2 years. But they're trying, Calvin, trying to isolate you. It's working." Monday morning proved him right. The feed store called my 30-year-old charge account was frozen, effective immediately. Cash only. The hardware store, same story. Even the gas station wanted payment up front. I had enough cash to run maybe 2 weeks. After that, things would get tight. Daisy called with more bad news. Georgia's lawyer filed for financial separation. Judge granted a temporary order. She gets half the checking account, exclusive use of the household credit cards. Can they do that? In a marital dispute, judge can do pretty much anything to maintain status quo. Status quo. Like anything about this was status quo. That afternoon, I found out what the restraining order really meant. Deputy Sheriff Tom Curtis, who I'd known since high school, served it at my door. "Sorry, Cal, just doing my job." The order was comprehensive. No contact with Georgia, no coming within 500 feet of the bank, no harassment of bank employees. Harassment being undefined, of course. "Tom, you know this is bullshit. I know lots of things, but a court order is a court order." After he left, I sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the last acre. The survey stakes were still there, bright orange in the dying light. Tomorrow they'd probably multiply, spread like cancer across the property line. The phone rang. I let the machine get it. "Calvin," George's voice, sad and disappointed. "It didn't have to be this way. All you had to do was sign the papers. Now look what you've made me do." The machine clicked off. Made her do. Like I'd forced her into Ezra's bed, forced her to forge my signature, forced her to steal what my father died protecting. I pulled out Dad's ledger, turned to a fresh page. Lost, church, community standing, credit, probably wife kept. The land for now, the truth, documented, self-respect, barely. Cooper had been right. Wars don't stay clean once they start, but sometimes the only way out is through. Daisy found it by accident, or maybe by the kind of thorough searching that comes from 30 years of knowing where bodies are buried in filing cabinets. Either way, when she called Tuesday morning, her voice had that careful tone people use when delivering terminal diagnoses. "Calvin, you need to come see something." The courthouse basement was cooler than the morning warranted, or maybe that was just the chill that ran through me when I saw what she'd found. 1984, she said, sliding the document across her desk. "Right before your knee surgery." A durable power of attorney, signed by me, witnessed, notarized proper. Limited scope, for household matters and routine banking during medical incapacity. But there it was. My signature, real as rain. "I never revoked it," I said, the words thick in my throat. "Never needed to. You recovered, came home, took back over everything. It should have expired, but it doesn't have an expiration date. No, it doesn't." I stared at my younger signature, remembering that October, the surgery I'd put off until after harvest, Georgia managing things while I was laid up for 3 weeks. She'd done good, kept everything running. I'd been grateful. Now that gratitude had teeth. "This is what they're using," Daisy said. "Wave this around. Claim Georgia had authority to sign for routine banking. Never mind that pledging the last acre as collateral isn't routine. It's enough to muddy the water. It's enough to give them cover, especially with you painted as unstable now. We sat with that for a moment, the weight of my own carelessness 14 years ago now crushing everything I'd built since. "There's more," Daisy said. "That notary on the forged amendment, I had Chloe come look at the actual document, not just the photocopy." Chloe Hernandez arrived 20 minutes later, dressed for her insurance office, but looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. "I could lose my notary license for getting involved," she said. "You could lose it anyway if someone's forging your seal," Daisy pointed out. Chloe examined the amendment through a magnifying glass, running her fingers over the embossed seal. "This is definitely not mine," she said finally. "The depth is wrong, too shallow. The font's from my old seal before I renewed. And look here," she pointed to tiny imperfections in the embossing. "Someone traced this from a photocopy, probably pressed it with something flat to fake the emboss." "Will you swear to that?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "If it goes to court, yes. But Calvin, I need something in writing protecting me from retaliation." We spent an hour drafting her affidavit, Chloe listing 3 specific discrepancies that proved the seal was forged. She signed it, Daisy notarized it, we made copies for everyone. Driving home, I thought about that POA from 1984, how one moment of trust had created this opening. Then I thought about what else I'd hidden, what other doors I'd left cracked open. The truth came out that night, alone in the truck with Cooper's tape recorder running. Fresh tape, fresh batteries, just me and the truth. This is Calvin Miller, September 15th, 1988. I need to state something for the record. I paused, gathering courage, or maybe just breath. In 1986, I took out a small renewal note, $5,000 to cover seed costs after the spring flood. I didn't tell Georgia, hid the paperwork, made the payments from the farm account she didn't check, paid it off in 8 months, destroyed the papers. The recorder hummed, patient as a priest. I taught my house to keep secrets, showed Georgia that papers could be hidden, that financial decisions could happen in the dark. I opened the door to deception. She just walked through it. I clicked off the recorder, sat in the silence. Outside, crickets sang their evening chorus, indifferent to human failures. Back in the house, I called Georgia. She answered on the 3rd ring. "You're violating the restraining order by calling. I'm offering you a way out." Silence. "Joint revocation of the POA from 84. We file it together, clean slate. You walk away from the amendment. I don't pursue fraud charges. You have no proof of fraud. I have Chloe's affidavit." Lincoln's statement. The motel records. You have circumstantial nothing. "Georgia, I know about the renewal note I hid in '86. A sharp intake of breath. I taught you that deception was acceptable. That was wrong. But what I'm doing is protecting my interests." "Your interests? Or Ezra's?" "Goodbye, Calvin." She hung up, but not before I heard something in the background, a man's voice, low and urgent. Ezra, probably, coaching her through the conversation. I locked Chloe's affidavit in the credit union box with the rest of the evidence. The POA from '84 I kept, a reminder of how small betrayals enable larger ones. The answering machine was blinking when I got home. I hit play. "You publish that affidavit, you'll drown in fees. Legal fees, filing fees, enforcement fees. Anderson has deep pockets, Mr. Miller. Deeper than yours." No name, but I recognized the voice Rodriguez from Anderson, the smooth talker who'd called before. I played it again, recording it on Cooper's backup machine. More evidence for the pile, though evidence of what, exactly? That they were scared? That Chloe's affidavit hit a nerve? I pulled out Dad's ledger, found a note in his hand from 1983. Trust, but verify. Reagan's right about the Russians. Works for neighbors, too. Even Dad knew. Even he kept one eye open while shaking hands. The phone rang again. This time it was Cooper. "Cal, you need to know something. Moore and Thomas did another appraisal today. Saw their truck at your place around noon. I wasn't home." "Exactly. They appraised your land without you present. That legal?" "If Anderson holds the note, probably." "Well, here's the interesting part. Tommy Henderson was doing delivery runs, saw them out by the last acre with someone else. A woman. My stomach dropped. Georgia? Red coat, burgundy cutlass. You tell me. Georgia. Walking the land with the vultures who wanted to carve it up, showing them the boundaries, the access points, the best angles for their theft. I sat at the kitchen table where we'd shared 27 years of meals, where she'd helped me with loan applications, where I'd trusted her with everything. The brass key lay on the table, the one that remembered too much. Next to it, my wedding ring, still in its saucer, gathering dust and regret. I'd locked my door but left the window open. Signed a POA and created a weapon. Hid a renewal note and taught deception as a tool. The last acre wasn't the only thing at stake anymore. It was the whole architecture of trust, the foundation of every signature I'd ever made. But tomorrow, armed with Chloe's affidavit and my own confession, I'd keep fighting. Because admitting your mistakes doesn't mean accepting your defeat, even if the signature you gave away comes back to haunt you. Even if the woman you trusted uses your own tactics against you. Even if the lock remembers everything you wish it would forget. Chapter 4. Dawn came with diesel engines and legal paper. Deputy Tom Curtis again, looking apologetic but official, a writ of replevin in his hand. Cal, I'm sorry, they're taking the equipment. Behind him, 2 flatbed trucks from Henderson's Towing, drivers I knew from town, everyone apologizing while they did their job. The writ was from Anderson Ag Servicing, not for the last acre that was still frozen, technically, but for the secured movable assets pursuant to default of loan terms. I'm not in default. According to this, you missed the accelerated payment triggered by the restructuring clause. What restructuring clause? Tom showed me the paperwork. Buried in subsection C of paragraph 19 was language I'd never seen any transfer of servicing rights triggered immediate payment of 20% of principal. Classic trap clause, probably added to the documents after I'd signed the originals. This is fraud, Tom. That's for a judge to decide. Right now, I've got a valid writ. They took the combine first. The John Deere 6600 I'd bought at auction 6 years ago, rebuilt with Cooper's help. The machine that had brought in 15 harvests. They hooked it up careful like pallbearers with a coffin. Next was the seed drill, then the cultivator. Each piece of equipment logged, photographed, serial numbers recorded. I did the same with my own camera, documenting the legal theft in progress. Cooper arrived as they were loading the combine. "This is bullshit," he said. "This is paper," I corrected. "Paper with a judge's signature." Same thing. He offered to hide the smaller equipment, the tools and parts they hadn't listed. I refused. Clean war, remember? We document everything, hide nothing. Clean war's got you standing here watching them steal your livelihood. He wasn't wrong. Without the combine, I couldn't harvest. Without the seed drill, I couldn't plant. I'd have to contract everything at premium rates if anyone would even work with me now. By noon, they'd taken what they came for. The barn stood empty except for hand tools and memories. Tom handed me the receipt, every item listed with its estimated value. "There'll be an auction," he said. "You can bid to get them back." "With what money?" He didn't answer, just climbed into his cruiser and drove away slow like he was leaving a funeral. The auction was that afternoon. Word travels fast in farming country. Equipment for sale means someone's in trouble, and trouble draws crowds like carrion draws crows. The sale yard was packed. Farmers from 3 counties, some I knew, some I didn't, all of them avoiding eye contact while they examined my equipment. The combine went first. Opening bid was half what it was worth. Jim Paulson bid it up to 2/3, then dropped out when a man in a suit raised a finger. The suit worked for Moore and Thomas Valuation. I recognized him from the appraisal visits. Final sale, $18,000 for a machine worth $30,000. The seed drill went for $3,000. The cultivator for $2,500. Total proceeds, $23,500 against a claimed debt of $47,000. Deficiency balance due immediately, Rodriguez from Anderson told me, appearing at my elbow like a snake. Unless you'd like to discuss alternatives. The only alternative I'm discussing is fraud charges. Good luck with that. Meanwhile, you owe us $23,500, plus fees, plus interest, plus costs of collection. He handed me another envelope, walked away whistling. Inside was a demand letter. Pay within 7 days or face additional remedies, including but not limited to foreclosure on real property. The last acre. Even frozen, even disputed, they were coming for it. I drove home through fields of other people's corn, tall and green and thriving. My own fields looked like broken teeth, some sections planted, some fallow, all of it now impossible to properly manage without equipment. The ledger math that night was brutal. Contract harvesting would cost triple what doing it myself cost. If I could even get someone to do it, most contractors were booked, and the ones who weren't wouldn't work for someone the bank had marked. Cooper came by with beer and bad news. "Nobody wants to touch your harvest," he said. "Word's out that Anderson's got lawyers on retainer just waiting to sue anyone who helps you. So the crop rots in the field, unless you harvest by hand like it's 1894. Might come to that." We sat on the porch, watching lightning bugs flash their desperate mating calls. Everything in nature was about continuation, preservation, survival. Everything except bankers and the women who loved them. "You could still walk away," Cooper said quietly. "Take what they offer, start over somewhere else." "With what? They've destroyed my credit, my reputation, my equipment. All I've got left is the land. Land you can't work. Land my father protected. Your father's dead, Cal." The words hung between us like the humidity, thick and suffocating. "He's dead, and Georgia's gone, and the bank owns your paper. How long you going to fight for ghosts?" I didn't answer because I didn't know. How long do you fight when winning looks just as ruined as losing? When keeping the land means losing everything else? The phone rang inside. The machine picked up. "Mr. Miller, this is Anderson Ag Servicing. We're prepared to make a final offer. Full debt forgiveness in exchange for voluntary transfer of Parcel 47B. You keep the rest of the farm, we drop all claims. This offer expires at close of business tomorrow." The machine clicked off. In the silence, I could hear the corn growing, that subtle rustle of leaves expanding in the night. My corn, my father's corn, soon to be nobody's corn if I couldn't figure out how to harvest it. I pulled out the index card with my 3 targets, now worn soft from handling. Target 1, forged amendment proven but not enough. Target 2, appraisal manipulation documented but legal. Target 3, conflict of interest, clear but unprosecutable. 3 shots fired, 3 wounds inflicted, but the beast still stood. In Dad's ledger I wrote, "They took the equipment. Tomorrow they come for the land." After that, nothing left to take but pride, and that's not worth much at the feed store. Cooper finished his beer, stood to leave. "Whatever you decide, Cal, I'm with you. But decide something. This limbo's killing you slower than losing would." After he left, I walked out to the last acre. The survey stakes glowed white in the moonlight, marking boundaries that might not matter anymore. The soil was dark and rich, ready for seed it might never receive. I thought about the combine, sold to strangers, the house, empty of George's presence, the church, closed to me now, everything stripped away piece by piece, legally, properly, with the right signatures on the right papers. But the land remained. The last acre stood patient as always, waiting to see if 3 generations of Millers ended with me. I pulled up one of the survey stakes, felt its point sharp against my palm. They could take the equipment. They could take the house. They could take everything that moved or could be moved. But the land itself? That would take more than paper. That would take surrender. And I wasn't there, yet. Monday morning came gray and bitter, matching my mood. I sat at the kitchen table with Cooper's tape recorder, the red light steady as a heartbeat. No more closed doors. Daylight only. I said it 3 times like an oath or a prayer. The empty barn visible through the window reminded me what privacy had cost my combine, my seed drill, my ability to bring in the harvest. Time to drag this whole mess into the light. Daisy Wilson's notary stamp hit the paper with the authority of truth. She'd come to the house early before the courthouse opened, wearing her official face. "This timeline statement," she said, "it's admissible as evidence. Every date, every document, every betrayal." "Every fact," I corrected. "Same thing in your case." I'd spent the weekend creating what Cooper called my dead man switch, 2 sealed packets containing everything. copies of the forged amendment, Chloe's affidavit about the fake notary seal, Lincoln's statement about the appraisal manipulation, the motel ledger pages, George's handwritten note about handling the acre. One stays with you, I told Daisy. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen. If something happens, I continued, you know what to do. The second packet went to Jaden Lopez at the Plains Gazette, kid reporter, hungry for a real story in a town that usually made news only during tornado season. This is dynamite, Jaden said, thumbing through the documents in his cluttered office. This is evidence. What you do with it is your business. You sure you want to go public? Once this is out there, it's already out there. George has been telling everyone I'm unstable. Ezra's been working behind closed doors. Time to open those doors. The VFW hall sat empty on Monday mornings, smelling like cigarettes and Old Glory. I booked it for Thursday night, the Farm Bureau's regular meeting slot. Public comment period was standard, though usually it was complaints about grain elevator prices or road maintenance. Cooper helped me set up. We tested his slide projector, made sure the chalkboard was visible from every seat. You're really doing this, he said. I'm really doing this. The whole town's going to be there. That's the point. My next stop was the bank. Not to see Ezra, the restraining order still stood, but Mr. Martin, the president. His secretary tried to wave me off, but I waited. 3 hours, drinking their terrible coffee, until he finally called me in. Calvin, this is becoming disruptive. Fraud usually is. He sighed, looking older than his 60 years. The freeze stands, but Anderson controls the servicing now. My hands are tied. I need it in writing. The freeze, your awareness of the investigation, all of it. That could be seen as the bank admitting liability. Or it could be seen as the bank cooperating with an investigation, your choice how to frame it. He wrote out a letter on bank letterhead, carefully worded but clear enough. The bank acknowledged the dispute, the freeze on last acre filings, and the pending investigation into potential irregularities. This doesn't mean we accept your version of events, he said. It means you're not denying them either. On the courthouse bulletin board, I tacked up a flyer. Last acre public update Thursday. 7 p.m. VFW Hall, evidence presented, questions answered. I signed it big, clear letters. Calvin Miller. Let them all see. Let them all come. The phone was ringing when I got home. George's voice on the machine, tight with anger. Calvin, take down that notice. You're humiliating yourself, and me. I picked up. You humiliated us both when you climbed into Ezra's bed. Silence, then. That's defamation. That's fact. Motel ledger, March 3rd and April 12th. Room 12. Those were business meetings. Funny kind of business that needs extra towels. What do you want? Joint revocation of the POA from '84. Written admission that the amendment is fraudulent. The last acre removed from any claims. You want me to admit to crimes I didn't commit? I want you to stop committing crimes, period. You want a spectacle. You want to destroy me publicly. I want my land protected. How public it gets is up to you. I offered you peace. You chose war. You chose war when you forged my signature. Thursday night, everyone will know it. She hung up hard enough to rattle the windows, or maybe that was just the storm coming in. That evening, I stood in the empty barn, looking at the oil stains where the combine had sat. $40,000 of equipment gone. Without it, the corn would rot in the fields unless I could find someone to contract harvest, and nobody would touch my fields now, not with Anderson's lawyers circling like vultures. But I still had paper. I still had truth. And Thursday night, I'd have witnesses. Cooper found me there, brought a beer and bad news. Anderson's sending representatives Thursday. Legal counsel, they said. Let them come. Calvin, they've got lawyers who eat farmers for breakfast. And I've got evidence that'll choke them. We stood in the doorway, watching lightning crawl across the horizon. The air tasted like copper and consequences. Your dad would be proud, Cooper said, fighting with paper instead of fists. Dad would have never let it get this far. No, he'd have shot Ezra by now. Different times. Better times? I thought about that. Simpler times. When a handshake meant something and signatures couldn't be faked. Signatures were always faked. just took longer without computers. The rain started, fat drops hitting the dirt like punctuation marks. I pulled out my wedding ring from my pocket, still carrying it, couldn't say why. 27 years, I said. Long time. Not long enough to see it coming. Cooper took the ring, held it up to the fading light. Gold's worn thin. Everything's worn thin. He handed it back. Except the land. Land endures. We'll see Thursday if that's true. The VFW marquee already had the notice up when I drove past. Farmers Forum through 7 p.m. Someone had added underneath in smaller letters, Miller situation. The Miller situation. Like I was a problem to be solved instead of a man trying to save his inheritance. Back home, I pulled out the evidence packets, went through everything one more time. Each document in order, each affidavit clear and damning. The truth, stacked and stamped and ready for war. In Dad's ledger, I wrote, Monday before the storm. Evidence packaged, venue secured, challenge issued. They want me quiet and private. Thursday, I give them loud and public. The phone rang again. Unknown number. Mr. Miller, this is Miss Rodriguez from Anderson Ag Services. We understand you're planning a public meeting. Public forum, First Amendment and all that. We'd like to offer an alternative. Private mediation, professional setting, binding resolution. I've had enough of private. Thursday, 7 p.m., VFW Hall. You're welcome to attend. This could be construed as harassment of our client relationship. Your client relationship is built on fraud. Thursday, everyone will see the proof. We have lawyers, Mr. Miller. And I have facts, Miss Rodriguez. See which weighs more. I hung up, turned off the ringer. No more phone calls, no more threats. Thursday would come soon enough. Outside, the rain pounded the last acre, turning good soil to mud. But underneath, the land waited patient as always. 3 days until the forum, 3 days until daylight hit every shadow. 3 days until the town learned what really happened to the Miller farm. Tuesday morning, I drove back to the Fairview Motel with a camera and a request. Mr. Gonzalez looked even more nervous than last time. I can't get involved in a legal matter, he said. Not asking you to. Just need you to confirm these copies are accurate. I showed him the photocopies from the ledger March 3rd, April 12th, E. Taylor's signature, room 12. If you sign this statement, it just says these are true copies from your records. Nothing more. And if I don't? Then I subpoena you in the original ledgers. Your choice quiet affidavit or public testimony. He signed. Daisy notarized it within the hour. Chloe Hernandez was harder to convince. I found her at her insurance office, lunch break, sandwich getting cold while we talked. I already gave you an affidavit, she said. I need more detail. The prosecutor will need specifics. What prosecutor? This is civil, not criminal. Forging a notary seal is criminal. Federal, actually. Her face went white. I didn't forge anything. I know, but someone did, using your seal. Help me prove it wasn't you. She pulled out her seal, the real one, and her commission paperwork. We spent an hour documenting everything, the exact differences in font, the depth of legitimate embossing versus the shallow fake, the serial number discrepancy. 3 specific points of forgery, she said, signing the expanded affidavit. Anyone who knows notary work would spot this as fake. But most people don't know notary work. No, they just trust the seal. Lincoln Jackson met me at the diner, bringing more than I'd asked for. Did some digging, he said, sliding a folder across the booth. Moore and Thomas Valuation has done 14 farm appraisals in the last 2 years. Every single one broke out prime parcels separately. Guess how many of those farms are still operational? How many? 3. The rest got foreclosed, and the prime parcels all went to Anderson Ag Services. Like clockwork. Here's my amended statement, names and dates included. The statement was beautiful in its simplicity. Lincoln laid out how the appraisal process had been corrupted, turned from evaluation into targeting. The last acre wasn't unique. It was part of a pattern. This could hurt Moore and Thomas, I said. Good. Vultures deserve to starve. The bank was my last stop. Not for Martin or Ezra, but for Molly Johnson. She met me in the parking lot in her car, engine running like she might bolt any second. I can't lose this job, she said. I'm not asking you to testify against the bank. Then what? Just confirm what you saw. The folder marked Amendment Miller. Ezra's after-hours access. Nothing that's not factual. She was quiet for so long I thought she'd drive away. Then, I keep thinking about Mrs. Morrison, lost her farm last year. Same pattern, suddenly her loan got complicated. New documents appeared. Prime 40 acres ended up with Anderson. Will you sign an affidavit? Limited scope. Only what I personally witnessed. No speculation. Facts only. That's all I want. We drafted it in her car, rain drumming the roof. She'd seen the Amendment Miller folder moved after hours. She'd seen Ezra access files outside normal procedures. She knew the signature cards didn't match but couldn't release them bank privacy laws. This is enough, I said. Enough for what? Enough to show the pattern, the method, the motive. Back home, Cooper had turned my kitchen into a war room. Documents spread across the table, each one numbered, labeled, ready for display. Chain of custody, he said, showing me his list. Every document, where it came from, who verified it, when it was notarized. Prosecutors love this stuff. We're not in court yet. Thursday night's a kind of court. Court of public opinion. We organized everything into exhibits, A through F, simple enough for farmers to follow, clear enough that lawyers couldn't muddy it. The phone rang. Cooper answered, listened, hung up. Anderson's legal team. They're threatening defamation charges if you present unsubstantiated allegations Thursday. Let them threaten. Cal, they've got deep pockets. And I've got documented truth. Which do you think holds up better in court? That evening, we did a dry run. I stood in my empty living room, Cooper playing audience, and presented each piece of evidence. Exhibit A, the forged amendment. Note the signature discrepancies. I held up the document, pointed to the tells. Exhibit B, Chloe Hernandez's affidavit. 3 points of notary seal forgery. Exhibit C, Georgia's handwritten note. E, this handles the acre. By the time I got to Exhibit F, Lincoln's pattern analysis, the case was overwhelming. It's good, Cooper said. Maybe too good. What do you mean? I mean, they're going to come at you hard. This threatens not just Ezra and Georgia, but Anderson's whole business model. Then they should have thought of that before they tried to steal my land. Wednesday flew by in final preparations. I made copies of everything, delivered packets to 3 more people insurance in case Anderson tried something before the forum. The VFW hall was set up, chairs arranged, projector tested. Jaden Lopez from the Gazette stopped by. This is going to be standing room only, he said. Whole town's talking about it. Good. Let them all come. Georgia's been making rounds too, telling people you're having a breakdown, that this is all paranoid delusion. What do you think? He looked at the evidence packets, neat and labeled and devastating. I think someone's delusional, but it's not you. Thursday morning came bright and cold. The rain finally passed. I put on my best shirt, the one I'd worn to Dad's funeral, and looked at myself in the mirror. 53 years old, weathered by sun and stress, about to take on a bank, a corporation, and my own wife in front of the whole town. Dad's voice echoed in memory. Truth is like seed. Plant it right, it grows regardless of weather. Tonight, I'd plant truth in every mind in that hall, and let's see what grew from that. The phone rang one last time. Georgia. Calvin, please, don't do this. Come to the forum. Hear the evidence. If you can refute it, I'll listen. You know I can't refute it. There it was. Almost an admission. Then you know what has to happen. I know you're about to destroy everything we built. No, Georgia. You destroyed it. I'm just showing everyone the wreckage. She was crying now, or pretending to. With Georgia, I couldn't tell anymore. I loved you, she said. You loved the idea of me. The reality was apparently worth less than whatever Ezra promised you. It wasn't supposed to go this far. How far was it supposed to go? Just far enough to steal the last acre? Just far enough to destroy 3 generations of work? I'm sorry. Sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught? The line went dead. Final conversation with my wife of 27 years, and it ended with a question she couldn't answer. Cooper arrived at 6:30. Ready? Ready? We loaded the evidence into his truck, boxes of truth about to be opened in front of everyone who mattered in Plains County. Whatever happens, Cooper said, you fought clean. Your dad would respect that. Let's see if the town does. We drove toward the VFW hall, toward the crowd already gathering, toward whatever came next. The evidence was solid. The truth was clear. Time to see if that was enough. The VFW hall was packed by 6:45. Every fold-out chair filled, people standing along the walls, more crowding the doorway. The whole town had come to watch Calvin Miller fight for his land or lose his mind trying. I stood at the front with my evidence boxes, Cooper beside me. The chalkboard behind us showed a timeline, dates, documents, connections. 3 photographs waited in the slide projector. The motel ledger entry, Chloe's seal comparison, Lincoln's parcel map. Ezra Taylor sat in the 3rd row, lawyer beside him, wearing his best suit and his banker's smile. Georgia was across the aisle in her red coat, Everly holding her hand. Between them sat Miss Rodriguez from Anderson, legal pad ready, surrounded by 2 more suits. The town had chosen sides by where they sat. My supporters, what few remained, clustered on the left. The bank's people filled the right. The undecided packed the middle, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. At 7 sharp, Frank Morrison, Farm Bureau president, called the meeting to order. "We have a special presentation tonight from Calvin Miller regarding his property dispute. Calvin, you have the floor." I stood, pulled out my first document, and spoke the words I'd rehearsed. No fists, no whispers, only paper and witnesses. The room went quiet. "I'm here to show you 3 things. First, that someone forged documents to steal the last acre. Second, who did it and why. Third, what I want done about it." I clicked on the projector. The motel ledger entry filled the wall. E. Taylor, room 12, March 3rd. Exhibit A, Plains County Bank's loan officer at the Fairview Motel. Same day my wife's book club started meeting. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ezra's lawyer started to stand, but Ezra pulled him down. Exhibit B. I held up the amendment, then projected Chloe's seal comparison. A forged document with a fake notary seal. "Miss Hernandez, would you please stand?" Chloe stood, shaking but determined. "That is not my notarization. The seal is forged. 3 specific points of forgery I can demonstrate." Objection! Ezra's lawyer was on his feet. "This isn't a court of law. These accusations—" "Sit down, Jim," Frank Morrison said. "Let the man present his case." I moved through each exhibit methodically. Daisy Wilson confirmed the filings and the UCC dispute. Lincoln Jackson explained how the appraisal had been manipulated, the last acre isolated for taking. "This isn't about one farm," Lincoln said, his voice carrying to the back row. 14 farms appraised by Moore and Thomas, 11 foreclosed. All prime parcels went to Anderson Ag Services. The middle section started shifting, leaning forward, paying attention. Exhibit E. I held up Georgia's handwritten note, her writing blown up on the wall. E. This handles the acre. My wife's hand, planning with the banker to handle my acre. The acre my father protected, that his father cleared, that was supposed to pass to the next generation. Georgia stood. Those meetings were church business. Room 12 at the Fairview Motel is church business. We needed privacy to discuss. To discuss what? How to forge my signature. How to steal what 3 generations built. "You're paranoid!" she shouted. "You've always been paranoid about money, about the farm, about everything." I clicked the tape recorder. Her voice filled the hall. "It wasn't supposed to go this far." Then Ezra's voice from the answering machine. "I'll bring the folder. You bring your signature." The hall erupted. People talking over each other, chairs scraping, voices rising. Frank Morrison banged his gavel a hammer he'd brought from home. "Order! We'll have order." Mr. Martin, the bank president, stood. The room quieted. "The bank has been investigating these allegations," he said carefully. "Based on the evidence presented tonight and our internal review, I'm announcing that Ezra Taylor is suspended immediately pending a full investigation." Ezra shot to his feet. "You can't. I can and I am. Furthermore, the bank will cooperate fully with any state banking examination and law enforcement investigation." Miss Rodriguez from Anderson stood next. "Mr. Miller's loan remains in default. These theatrics don't change the financial facts." "The financial facts," I said, "are built on forged documents. Documents your company knew were fraudulent when you accepted the servicing rights. That's a serious accusation." "Yes, it is, and I have the evidence to back it up." I pulled out the final folder. Copies of everything presented tonight have been provided to the State Banking Commission, the Attorney General's office, and the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. The room went silent. I'm not asking for sympathy, I said, looking at the packed hall. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for justice. The last acre stays in the Miller family. The fraudulent documents get voided, and the people who tried to steal it face consequences. Old Mr. Williams stood up in the back. I've known Calvin Miller his whole life. Knew his father, too. If Cal says these documents are forged, they're forged. Mrs. Henderson stood next. I've been banking at Plains County for 40 years. If they're doing this to Calvin, who else are they doing it to? One by one, farmers started standing. Not all, but enough. The tide was turning. Georgia pushed through the crowd toward the door, Everly behind her. She stopped at my row, looked at me with tears streaming. You won, she said. You happy? You destroyed me in front of everyone. You destroyed yourself when you chose theft over marriage. She left, red coat disappearing into the night. I'd never see her in this hall again. Ezra's lawyer was packing up, whispering urgently. Miss Rodriguez was on her phone, probably calling Anderson's legal department. Frank Morrison banged his hammer again. The Farm Bureau moves to support full investigation of these allegations. All in favor? A forest of hands went up. Motion carried. Calvin, we're behind you. The meeting broke up slowly, people coming forward to shake my hand, to apologize for doubting, to share their own suspicious experiences with the bank. Jaden Lopez was scribbling notes fast as his hand could move. This is front page. Hell, this is state news. Just tell the truth, I said. The truth is going to burn some people. Fire clears dead wood. New growth comes after. By 9 p.m., the hall was empty except for Cooper and me. We packed up the evidence, took down the timeline, returned the room to its normal state. You did it, Cooper said. I proved it. Whether anything comes of it remains to be seen. The whole town saw. The whole town knows. That's something. We drove home through quiet streets. Porch lights were on at houses that had been dark to me for weeks. The community was digesting what they'd learned, choosing new sides. At the farm, I stood in the empty barn, evidence boxes at my feet. The combine was still gone, the harvest still impossible without help. But something had shifted. The phone was ringing in the house. I let it ring. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and threats and consequences. But tonight, the truth was out. The last acre was still mine, and everyone knew what it had cost to keep it. Chapter 5. Dawn broke with 2 envelopes in the mailbox, both registered mail, both requiring signatures. Jenny Patterson wouldn't meet my eyes as I signed, but she managed a small "Good luck, Calvin" before driving away. The first envelope was from Anderson Ag Services, notice of trustees' sale. They were moving to auction the farm in 14 days, betting the state investigation would move slower than their lawyers. The second was from the state banking examiner. Preliminary inquiry opened. Document submission required. Hearing scheduled in 12 days. 2 clocks ticking in opposite directions. I drove to the sheriff's office. Tom Curtis was at his desk, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Tom, they're trying to auction my farm while it's under investigation. One's civil, one's regulatory. Different systems. It's the same fraud. I know that, you know that, but the law sees it different. You need a judge to issue a stay on the sale. How do I get that? Emergency motion? Better move fast. Daisy helped me file the motion that afternoon, attaching every piece of evidence from the forum, the bank's suspension letter, the state's investigation notice. Judge Henderson will hear it, she said. He's fair, but he's also careful. Doesn't like to interfere with contract law. This isn't about contracts, it's about fraud. Make sure your lawyer argues that... What lawyer? I can't afford anyone who'd take on Anderson. Then you better learn to argue it yourself. The hearing was set for Friday 48 hours to prepare a legal argument that could save my farm. Thursday morning brought more consequences. A grand jury inquiry notice for Georgia, summoning her as a person of interest in bank fraud. She'd have to provide handwriting samples, testify under oath. Cooper brought the news from town. She's staying with Everly, but word is she's packing to leave. Running won't help. They'll find her. Maybe. but it'll make your life easier if she's gone. That afternoon, Anderson made one last play. New survey stakes appeared along the last acre, bright orange flags marking their claim. With them came a trespass warning I couldn't remove the stakes without facing criminal charges. I called the sheriff. Tom came out, looked at the stakes, read the freeze order from the bank. "The freeze is still valid," he said. "These stakes shouldn't be here." He called it in, got authorization, and we pulled every stake together. I documented each one, photographed their placement, kept the flags as evidence. "They're testing boundaries," Tom said, "seeing what they can get away with before the hearing. They're scared. Scared people do desperate things. Watch yourself, Cal." That evening, 3 trucks pulled into my drive. Mr. Williams, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Jones farmers who'd been my father's friends, who'd stood silent during the community's shunning. "Heard you might need help with harvest," Williams said. "If the court gives you time. Can't pay much. Didn't ask about pay. Asked if you need help. I need help. Then you'll have it. We've got a combine between us. Older model, but it works. After what we saw Tuesday night, figure it's the least we can do." They left before I could properly thank them. The community was starting to heal, one small gesture at a time. Friday's hearing came fast. The courthouse was packed again. Word had spread that Calvin Miller was fighting Anderson Ag Services in open court. Judge Henderson, 70 years old and sharp as winter wind, reviewed the motion while the courtroom waited. "Mr. Miller, you're representing yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And Anderson is represented by 3 attorneys, I see." "Very well. Present your argument." I stood, legs shaky but voice steady. "Your Honor, this sale is based on fraudulent documents. The state is investigating. The bank has suspended the employee involved. To allow the sale to proceed would be to reward fraud." Anderson's lead attorney, a woman from the capital who looked like she ate family farms for breakfast, stood next. "Your Honor, Mr. Miller is in clear default. His emotional presentation at a community meeting doesn't change the financial facts. Anderson has valid servicing rights and the right to enforce them. Based on documents under investigation for forgery," I countered. "Alleged forgery, unproven allegations." Judge Henderson raised his hand. "I've reviewed the evidence. Ms. Hernandez's affidavit about the notary seal is particularly compelling." He pulled out the amendment, studied it through reading glasses. "This seal does appear irregular. Mr. Miller, do you have the original Mr. Jackson's appraisal?" I handed it forward. "Showing the farm as an integrated unit, Your Honor. The separation of the last acre was done specifically to isolate it for taking." "Objection," Anderson's attorney said. "That's speculation." "That's pattern and practice," Judge Henderson interrupted. "I've seen 3 other cases this year with similar fact patterns, all involving Anderson Ag Services." The courtroom stirred. The judge was seeing the pattern. "I'm granting a 30-day stay on any sale or foreclosure proceedings. Furthermore, all documents related to this case are to be sequestered with the county clerk pending the state investigation." "Your Honor," Anderson's attorney started, "my ruling stands. Mr. Miller, you have 30 days. Use them wisely." Outside the courthouse, Georgia waited by the door, not to talk to me, but to be served. The sheriff handed her a subpoena for handwriting samples while her attorney protested about harassment. "It's not harassment," Tom said. "It's investigation." Georgia looked at me across the courthouse steps. "This is what you wanted? To see me destroyed? I wanted the last acre protected. You chose to make it a war. We could have worked it out privately. Your version of private was conspiracy to commit fraud." Her attorney pulled her away, but not before she said, "You'll regret this, Calvin. When you're alone on that farm with nothing but paper and principles, you'll regret this. Maybe, but not today." Back at the farm, I found the 2 notices posted on the fence, the trustees' sale with "stayed" stamped across it in red, and the state hearing notice, counting down to resolution. Cooper brought beer and news. "Ezra's been fired, not suspended, terminated, bank's cleaning house." "And Georgia?" "Everly says she's leaving tomorrow, moving to her cousins in Kansas." "Running from the grand jury?" "Running from the shame. Whole town knows now. Can't buy groceries without people whispering." I felt something, not satisfaction, not sadness, just empty completion, like finishing harvest on a field that wouldn't be replanted. What about Anderson? I asked. Word is they're pulling back from Plains County. Too much heat. State's looking at all their acquisitions now. So we won? You survived. Sometimes that's the same as winning. The rain started again as night fell, gentler this time. I stood on the porch watching it soak into the last acre. In 12 days, the state would rule. In 30 days, the stay would expire. Between those two markers, my future would be decided. But tonight, I had my land. I had my evidence. I had the truth finally spoken aloud. Dad's voice echoed. Some fights you win, some you survive. The land doesn't care which, as long as you're still standing when it's over. I was still standing. Barely, but standing. The county courthouse filled early for the emergency stay hearing. I sat at the plaintiff's table alone, no lawyer, just my stack of documents and the truth. Across the aisle, Anderson's legal team had grown to 4 attorneys, all in suits that cost more than my truck. Georgia sat in the gallery, red coat like a wound against the wooden benches. She'd been served with criminal papers that morning. The grand jury had moved fast. Judge Henderson entered at 9 a.m. sharp, his black robes making him look like judgment itself. We're here on Miller v. Anderson Ag Services, emergency motion to stay foreclosure. Mr. Miller, call your first witness. I stood. Daisy Wilson, county clerk. Daisy took the stand, steady as bedrock. She laid out the chain of custody for every document, the filing irregularities, the pattern of last-minute submissions designed to avoid scrutiny. The amendment adding the last acre as collateral was never properly filed, she stated. It only existed in bank records until they tried to enforce it. Anderson's lead attorney, Miss Sharp from the Capitol, cross-examined hard. Mrs. Wilson, you're not a handwriting expert, are you? No, but I know Calvin Miller's signature, seen it for 20 years. But you can't definitively say it's forged. I can say it doesn't match any other signature in my files. Next came Chloe Hernandez. She brought her seal, her records, her expertise. This is my real seal, she said, pressing it into paper for the court to see. Deep, clear, precise. The seal on the amendment is shallow, wrong font, wrong year. It's not just forged, it's poorly forged. Could someone have used your seal without your knowledge? Miss Sharp asked. My seal stays locked in my office safe. No one has access but me. Lincoln Jackson testified about the appraisal manipulation, how the last acre was deliberately isolated to make it attractive as collateral. In 40 years of appraisal work, I've never seen a farm broken up this way unless someone was planning to take pieces of it. Mr. Martin from the bank was my strongest witness. Under oath, he was more forthcoming than in his office. Ezra Taylor was terminated for cause, he stated. Internal investigation found irregularities in multiple loan files. Multiple? Judge Henderson leaned forward. How many? 7 that we've identified so far. All with Anderson as the servicer? Yes, Your Honor. The courtroom stirred. This was bigger than just my farm. Anderson's turn came after lunch. Miss Sharp called their appraiser, who claimed the subdivision was standard practice. Their document expert said the signature could be genuine. Their servicing manager swore they'd acted in good faith. Then they called Georgia. She took the stand in her red coat, looking small and wounded. Miss Sharp's questions were gentle, leading. Mrs. Miller, did you ever sign documents on your husband's behalf? Sometimes. For routine things. Did you have authority to do so? He gave me power of attorney in 1984. And was pledging collateral something you might handle? Georgia hesitated. I could see her calculating, weighing truth against consequences. Mrs. Miller? Judge Henderson prompted. I believed I was helping. That's not what I asked. Did you sign the amendment? The courtroom held its breath. Georgia looked at me, then at Ezra's empty chair. He hadn't shown up, probably on advice of counsel. I need to invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Gasps from the gallery. Taking the Fifth in a civil case could be used against her, but it protected her from the criminal charges brewing. Judge Henderson nodded. That's your right. You may step down. Miss Sharp tried to recover. Your Honor, regardless of who signed what, Mr. Miller is in default. Anderson has valid servicing rights based on potentially fraudulent documents, the judge interrupted. I've seen enough. He stood, and we all rose with him. This court finds sufficient evidence of fraud to warrant a complete stay of all foreclosure proceedings. Furthermore, I'm ordering all original documents to be sequestered pending criminal investigation. Your Honor, Miss Sharp started. I'm not finished. Anderson Ag Services is prohibited from any action regarding the Miller property for 90 days. If criminal charges are filed, that stay becomes permanent until resolution. This is unprecedented. So is the pattern of fraud I'm seeing. 7 farms, Mr. Martin said. 7 families potentially defrauded. This court will not be party to theft by paperwork. He banged his gavel. Stay granted. Court adjourned. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for phones. Farmers shook my hand. Anderson's lawyers huddled, planning appeals. Georgia pushed through the crowd toward me. Calvin. A sheriff's deputy stepped between us. Ma'am, you're needed at the courthouse. Grand jury wants to see you now. She looked at me over the deputy's shoulder. I never meant for it to go this far. You meant for it to go far enough to steal my land. I meant to secure our future. You meant to secure your future. With Ezra, with my inheritance funding it. The deputy led her away. It was the last time I'd see her in that red coat, the last time she'd stand in a Plains County courthouse as Georgia Miller. Outside, Cooper waited with his truck running. Heard the ruling on the radio. 90 days, that's huge. 90 days to prove criminal fraud. If we can't, Anderson comes back harder. Then we better prove it. That evening, I got a call from the state banking examiner's office. The hearing was moved up Monday, 3 days away. They'd received significant new evidence and wanted to expedite. What new evidence, I asked. Ezra Taylor's agreed to cooperate. Full testimony in exchange for reduced charges. Ezra flipping on Georgia and Anderson. The banker choosing self-preservation over loyalty, just like he'd chosen theft over honest work. I stood on the porch that night, looking at the last acre in moonlight. The survey stakes were gone, the threat suspended, the land still mine for now. But Monday would bring new testimony, new revelations, new consequences. The war wasn't over, just shifted to a different battlefield. In the kitchen, my wedding ring still sat in its saucer, tarnishing slowly. 27 years of marriage reduced to evidence in a fraud case. But the land endured. The last acre waited patient as always, indifferent to human drama, ready for whatever came next. 3 more days until the state decided everything. 3 more days until the final truth came out. Chapter 6. The state banking examiner's hearing was held in the federal building in Lincoln, 2 hours from Plains County. The room was all wood paneling and gravity, the kind of place where careers and lives got decided by people in suits. I sat with Cooper and Daisy, my small army of truth against Anderson's battalion of lawyers. Georgia wasn't there. Her attorney appeared for her, fighting a losing battle against mounting evidence. The examiner, a thin man named Carlson, who looked like he'd been born in a regulatory manual, called the hearing to order. We're here to determine if fraudulent banking practices were employed in the matter of Miller v. Plains County Bank and Anderson Ag Services. Ezra Taylor took the stand first. He'd lost weight, his banker's confidence replaced by the nervous energy of a man trying to save himself. State your involvement with the Miller loan, Carlson directed. Ezra's testimony was devastating in its clarity. He laid out the whole scheme, how Anderson identified prime parcels, how he manipulated appraisals, how Georgia had helped forge documents. Mrs. Miller was cooperative, he said, not looking at me. She believed her husband was mismanaging the farm, that she was protecting their interests. By forging his signature? By signing what she thought she had authority to sign. The power of attorney from 1,984 inches was for household matters, not farm collateral. You knew that. I may have been optimistic in my interpretation. You mean fraudulent. I mean optimistic. But then came the real bomb. Ezra produced records, emails, memos, recorded phone calls he'd secretly kept as insurance. Anderson knew, he said. They knew every document was questionable. They counted on farmers not having resources to fight back. He played a recording from his phone, Rodriguez from Anderson, saying, "We don't need perfect paperwork, just good enough to foreclose. These farmers can't afford lawyers to prove otherwise." The room went silent except for the scratch of the court reporter's keys. Anderson's lawyers tried damage control, but more evidence kept coming. 7 farms with forged documents. 11 with manipulated appraisals. A pattern so clear even a city examiner could see it. Carlson called a recess, returned with his ruling an hour later. This office finds systematic fraud in the relationship between Plains County Bank, specifically Mr. Ezra Taylor, and Anderson Ag Services. All loans serviced through this arrangement are void. Original terms are restored. The matter is referred to the Attorney General for criminal prosecution. Simple words that changed everything. Anderson's lawyers immediately filed for appeal, but the damage was done. Within a week, Anderson withdrew from 6 states, their agricultural division dismantled. Ezra got 2 years federal minimum security, pled down from 10. White-collar crime, they called it, though it had dirt under its fingernails from trying to steal farms. Georgia's consequences came in waves. First, the criminal charges. The grand jury indicted her for aiding bank fraud. Her lawyer negotiated it down to falsification of business records probation, community service, a federal felony on her record forever. Then the divorce. With the fraud proven, the court ruled the last acre was never marital property. She got no claim to it, no share of its value. The prenuptial agreement we'd signed in younger, more trusting days held firm. Finally, the social exile. Plains County had no room for someone who'd betrayed one of their own that way. She left for Kansas, then further west, chasing anonymity. The last document she signed was a stipulation admitting misrepresentations regarding collateral. Not an apology, just a legal acknowledgement. I signed the divorce papers the same day. The farm survived but changed. Without equipment, I had to rent and borrow. The community helped. Mr. Williams brought his combine, Mr. Brown his planter, Mr. Jones his cultivator. We worked the fields together like farmers did in my grandfather's time, sharing labor and machinery. Cooper kept the books, documenting every hour of help given and received. Clean war has a clean aftermath, he said. The corn came in short that year, stressed by the chaos of the season. But it came in. The last acre produced like always, indifferent to human drama. 3 years later, 1991. I stood at the edge of that same field. Wheat grew where corn once had, rotation bringing its own kind of healing. The farm was smaller now. I'd sold some parcels to pay legal bills, but the last acre remained. Daisy visited that spring with paperwork. Final filing, she said. Everything's clear. No liens, no claims, no shadows on the title. I signed where she pointed, the same signature they'd tried to forge, now protecting what forgery had tried to steal. Heard from Georgia? She asked. No. Ezra's out. Early release. Moved to Florida, selling insurance. Good for him. You're not bitter? Bitter takes energy I need for farming. She left me with the cleared deed, every official stamp declaring the land mine free and clear. That evening, I walked the last acre's borders. No survey stakes, no threats, just fence posts and memory. Dad's voice echoed across the years. Keep the acre whole. I had, barely, at a cost I couldn't have imagined. The brass key still worked in the kitchen door. Though the lock had been changed twice since that night, it remembered too much. The wedding ring had long since been sold for scrap gold, $47, which I donated to the church's emergency farm fund. In Dad's ledger, on the last page, I wrote, June 1991. The last acre stands. The family continues, even if just me. Cost, 1 marriage, 1 combine, most friendships, all trust. Gained, truth, clear title, knowledge that some things are worth any price. The land doesn't forgive or forget. It just endures. So do I. I closed the ledger, placed it on the shelf next to the deed. Outside, the wheat moved in evening wind, a golden sea that had weathered every storm. Some things you inherit, some things you fight for, some things you hold on to even when holding costs everything else. The last acre had taught me the difference. It hadn't forgiven me for what the fight had cost. Forgiveness wasn't in its nature. But it had let me stay, let me work it, let me pretend that keeping it had been worth losing everything else. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all any of us could ask from the land we love, not absolution, just permission to remain. I walked back to the empty house, footsteps echoing on boards that had heard too much. Tomorrow would bring new seasons, new plantings, new chances to prove the acre had been worth the price. Tonight, I had what 3 generations of millers had fought for, clear title to the last acre. It would have to be enough. It was all I had left. What haunts me most about Calvin's story isn't the betrayal itself, but his refusal to seek revenge. Even when he had every right to destroy Georgia and Ezra completely, he chose justice over vengeance, keeping his war clean even as they played dirty. Some might call him weak for not pressing criminal charges harder or suing for damages, but I see a man who understood that keeping his father's land meant more than winning every battle. The real tragedy here is that Calvin saved the last acre but lost everything else in the process, and I can't help but wonder, was a piece of land really worth a 27-year marriage, even a broken one?